Chapter 19. Although she already knew in advance who the dead person in the first layer of the dreamland was, Su-won still didn't dare to have the slightest bit of carelessness. In this world, anything could happen. She could know the plot in advance and use the plot. Then wouldn't other people also be able to? Towards Chimu, Su-won was still as distant as before. This man didn't give her a good feeling. In the original plot, he was also a black-bellied villain. Even half of the 9 people died because of him. That was when the plot progressed to the 5th layer of the dreamland. Chimu, who was proficient in calculations, discovered that there was a certain rule in every dreamland and every layer of the dreamland would have a death quota. Yes, no more, no less. Only one. 9 layers of dreamland, 9 people. Only one person could reach the last layer alive. Ever since knowing this hidden rule, Chimu, in order to protect himself, began to intentionally or unintentionally mislead and frame others. In the end, he even began to kill his companions. Of course, an unforeseen event occurred when he killed Ezxian. Ezxian started to go back in time the moment Chimu made his move. Afterwards, he, who had the initiative, instead controlled Chimu under Chimu's lead. The 3 people finally arrived at the open space he mentioned. Looking at the pile of firewood on the edge of the open space, Su-won suspiciously looked at Chimu. "Big brother Chi, did you prepare this?" "Yes, ah." Chimu indifferently nodded his head. "I originally wanted to check more in the woods, but in the end, I met you guys. But this firewood should be enough." As he spoke, Chimu crouched down and took out a lighter from his pocket with ease. Watching him throw the lighter up and spin it a few times, Su-won couldn't help but roll her eyes. On the other hand, Fong Tian kept following Chimu's side without any schemes, looking at him with a face full of worship. The little girl didn't have any schemes, but she was easily confused by appearances. After a while, Chimu had already raised the fire. The 3 people surrounded the bonfire. The orange bonfire, in the flickering shadows of the trees in the night, actually made people feel a lot warmer. Even the chill that originally accumulated in their hearts seemed to be gradually dispelled. Fong Tian and Su-won sat at one end of the bonfire. The 2 people leaned back to back. Not long after, Fong Tian breathed evenly and fell asleep. Su-won wasn't tired at all, but seeing Chimu on the other side quietly observing her and Fong Tian, Su-won simply closed her eyes. Not long after, she breathed evenly and fell asleep. Seeing that the 2 people were asleep, Chimu stared at the bonfire a few more times. Then, he cautiously stood up and turned around to walk into the depths of the forest. After Chimu's figure disappeared, Su-won suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were not sleepy at all. It was so late. What was Chimu going to do by himself? Why did he wait until she and Fong Tian fell asleep before he left? Su-won's hand gently landed on her backpack. She opened the zipper and took out the tissue that she used to wipe her face in the evening from a small compartment inside. As expected, staring at the crumpled tissue, Su-won's face became somewhat unsightly. "Su-won, you're awake?" Chimu's voice suddenly sounded behind Su-won. She pretended to be frightened and clenched the paper ball in her hand. Her face was pale as she slowly turned her head. "Big brother Chi, you scared me to death. Why did you run behind us?" Chimu's expression was somewhat awkward. I got up to go to the toilet and then I got lost. Your mother. This place is simply a high-level maze at night. I can't find the way at all." "Oh, is that so?" Su-won's face also revealed a trace of awkwardness. "Actually, I also want to go to the toilet." Chimu slightly drooped his eyes. Don't go too far. Rest assured, I won't peek at you." As he spoke, Chimu returned to the place he was originally sitting and laid down. As if he was afraid that Su-won would be worried, he simply covered himself with his coat and turned his back towards Su-won's direction. Su-won took out her cell phone from her backpack and used the cell phone as a flashlight. She slowly walked into the forest behind her. The forest at night looked like a huge black beast. It was unknown when it would open its bloody mouth. Actually, Su-won didn't want to solve her physiological problem. She just didn't want to arouse Chimu's suspicion. After walking a few steps in the forest, Su-won stopped and sat on a rock at the side. The cell phone screen was suffused with a faint white light. Su-won subconsciously looked at the time. It was already 10:50 at night, and the cell phone's battery still had 2 bars of electricity. Just as Su-won was staring at the cell phone screen, the image on her cell phone screen suddenly changed. The ear-piercing ringtone startled Su-won so much that she almost threw the cell phone away. The ringtone continued, sharp and ear-piercing. The screen showed the caller's name. It was actually Fan Shu-jun. Fan Shu-jun and Xian lived together in male dormitory 503. When Su-won and Xian were together, she saved his phone number. In the original owner's memory, Fan Shu-jun was an otaku who wasn't good with words. His usual hobby was to hole up in the dormitory and play games. Or he would team up with his roommate Chin-lu and go to the internet cafe to book a room. This was a standard game otaku. At the same time, he was also one of the 9 people on this spring outing. Su-won's gaze flashed. She saw that her cell phone still didn't have any signal, but the incessantly flashing caller ID told her that everything that happened at this time wasn't an illusion. Hey, Fan Shu-jun? Without time to hesitate, Su-won immediately answered the phone. Sha sha sha, sha sha sha. A burst of strange rubbing sounds came from the receiver, making people's spines turn cold. Fan Shu-jun, is that you? Su-won's hand that was holding the cell phone tightened. She couldn't help but ask again. Ninth. A burst of repressed and hoarse male voice intermittently transmitted from the receiver. Su-won couldn't even determine whether that was Fan Shu-jun's voice or not, but she still couldn't help but ask, what ninth? Fan Shu-jun's face turned red. Meng, creak. The voice on the phone started to become strange and creepy. Su-won still maintained the position of talking, but she felt that Fan Shu-jun's breathing was gradually disappearing. Do. Chapter 20. When Su-won woke up, her sensitive sense of smell smelled a faintly discernible fragrance. She drowsily lifted her eyelids and saw Chimu busily roasting rabbit meat. Fong Tian was still leaning on Su-won's side. The little girl slept very soundly. You're awake? As if noticing the movement on Su-won's side, Chimu raised his head and glanced at Su-won. The morning sun shone through the mottled and dense branches and leaves, shining on Chimu's side profile. At this moment, this man's smile was as warm as spring. Su-won's gaze only looked at Chimu once and more fell on the branch in his hand. It turns out that you also know how to do this. It's really surprising. A rich and idle person, a pampered hedonistic young master, right now really made people raise their eyebrows. Chimu's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity and his face habitually raised a cynical smile. If I can't go out of the hall and into the kitchen, what face do I have to pick up girls? These days, a man who can't cook is not a good husband. As he spoke, Chimu tore off a piece of freshly roasted meat and handed it to Su-won. Ladies first. Don't worry, I washed my hands. Su-won did not act pretentious and took the barbecue and slowly ate it. In the end, Fong Tian was also attracted by the fragrance and woke up. The 3 people ate to their heart's content and then began to study the next journey. Chimu's travel bag was very big, and there were some outdoor supplies and a few bottles of water. Although they wouldn't die of thirst or starvation if they kept waiting here, there would be a day when they would be trapped to death. Finally, the 3 people decided to go in a certain direction. Even if they couldn't find other people, at least they had to find the exit out of this forest. The following day was uneventful, but the more tranquil it was, the more uneasy Su-won became. Until the evening, Fong Tian suddenly seemed to have discovered a new continent and shouted towards a direction. Fong Tian, quickly look. There's a house there. House. Su-won and Chimu coincidentally raised their eyes at the same time. Sure enough, they saw that under the cover of the trees, there was a solitary bamboo building standing there. Bamboo building. Su-won's complexion changed again. In her memory, the first layer of the dreamland was absolutely not like this. There was also never a bamboo building. Moreover, such a bamboo building. While Su-won was hesitating, through the dense forest, a few rays of light that weren't too bright suddenly shone over from the bamboo building. Who's there? Is it Su-won, Tian? A clear and cold male voice slowly came. Hearing this voice, Fong Tian's eyes brightened a bit. Qin Lu. Qin Lu. It's me. We're here. Qin Lu is also Easy Xuan's roommate, and at the same time, Fong Tian has always had a crush on him. Sure enough, not long after Fong Tian's voice fell, the sound of footsteps came from the woods, and then Qin Lu's tall figure appeared in front of the three people. He was still wearing the black tracksuit he had worn on the day of departure, and he held a flashlight in his hand. When Qin Lu saw the three figures, he seemed to be greatly relieved. The three of you are finally back. Su Wan stared blankly, and Chimu also imperceptibly wrinkled his brows. Only Fong Tian foolishly smiled at Qin Lu for a while, as if she saw a relative. From head to toe, she didn't have that cautious, panicked, and scared appearance that she had during the day. Go in, everyone's here. As Qin Lu spoke, he took the flashlight and walked towards the direction of the bamboo building. Fong Tian naturally smiled and followed closely behind Qin Lu. Su Wan subconsciously slowed down her footsteps, and Chimu also followed her and slowed down. Do you feel that there's something strange? Chimu leaned against Su Wan's ear and softly whispered. Because Chimu was a lot taller than Su Wan, at this moment, he lowered his head and even slightly bent his body. His warm breath constantly lingered beside Su Wan's ear. Su Wan didn't like this overly ambiguous distance, but at this time, she indeed felt that something was wrong. Right now, the four people had already arrived in front of the bamboo building. Su Wan carefully looked at the bamboo building in front of her. The building had 3 floors and looked like it had been built for many years, carrying a sense of vicissitudes. Zixian, Yu Feng, Chimu and the others are back. As soon as he arrived at the door, Qin Lu loudly shouted towards the inside. Creak, along with his voice. The door of the bamboo building opened. A youth wearing a gray t-shirt and blue jeans stood at the door. His gaze directly fell on Su Wan. Yi Zixian. At this moment, Su Wan was also looking at Yi Zixian. Yi Zixian's figure was sturdy and well-proportioned. Because he was born in the mountains, his skin wasn't white and was a healthy wheat color. This kind of man, matched with delicate and handsome facial features indeed, had the capital to move the original owner's heart. But unfortunately, since you're back, quickly come in. In the end, it was still Yi Zixian who opened his mouth first. His tone was indifferent, and no other emotions could be heard. Chen Yufeng, who was at the side, cooperated and leaned sideways at the door. He also secretly curled his lips at Chimu. Everyone knew that Yi Zixian and Su Wan had already broken up for more than half a year. Although the two of them were still single, there was absolutely no possibility of them getting back together. Su Wan stood in the same place and didn't move. Seeing that she didn't understand, Chimu also didn't move. Only Fong Tian was still heartlessly following Qin Lu. When they reached the door, she couldn't help but turn her head and look at Su Wan. Why aren't you guys going in? As she spoke, Fong Tian's foot already stepped into the bamboo building. Come back. Su Wan suddenly and fiercely grabbed Fong Tian's arm. In that instant, the bamboo building in front of her started to strangely distort and finally turned into a boundless black hole. Qin Lu, Yi Zixian, and Chen Yufeng in front of her all turned into a black fog, but Su Wan was still grabbing Fong Tian's arm tightly. Fong Tian, who had half of her body swallowed by the black fog, suddenly slowly turned her head. That was a badly mutilated face. Her 2 eyeballs fell out of her eye sockets, swaying incessantly on that sinister face. Her red lips that were constantly bleeding opened eerily, revealing a mouthful of sharp white teeth. Su Wan, I died so miserably. I died so miserably. Fong Tian's hands suddenly turned into sharp white bones and fiercely grabbed towards Su Wan's heart. Be careful. Chimu suddenly bumped over from the side. Borrowing the huge impact force, he knocked away Fong Tian's hand. Chimu pulled Su Wan and ran into the woods without looking back. The black fog silently spread in the woods. Wherever it went, all the trees seemed to have a life of their own. All of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they attacked Su Wan and Chimu. Thick and sharp branches sprang out from all directions, even under their feet. Su Wan only felt that her eyes darkened and her whole body was protected in Chi Mu's embrace. Those knife-like branches instantly pierced through Chi Mu's body, leaving one hideous bloody hole after another on his body. Fresh blood flowed out non-stop like it was free. Su Wan's line of sight was covered by a blood-red color. Chi Mu. After a long time, she finally found her voice. Chi Mu's face was covered in blood, but the corners of his mouth still barely hooked up into a smile that wasn't a smile. Although the hero saving the beauty isn't me. Not my style, but if it's you. He hadn't finished speaking when those sharp branches once again covered the sky and covered the earth. Chi Mu closed his eyes as if he had accepted his fate. Su Wan's eyes also reddened at this moment. She was tightly hugged in Chi Mu's embrace. Her hands and feet couldn't move, but this didn't mean that she couldn't do anything. Wake up. Su Wan suddenly shouted a sentence at Chi Mu. I told you to wake up. The surrounding was a pitch-black, dense forest, and the bonfire beside them had already burned to the end. The night wind was very cold, but Chi Mu woke up from his sleep drenched in cold sweat and saw the scene in front of him. Su Wan and Fang Tian were still back-to-back on the other side, breathing deeply. Was it a dream? Chi Mu subconsciously touched his body. His body was intact and didn't have any wounds. He seemed to have had a nightmare just now, but it was a bit fuzzy, making people unable to remember the scene in the dream. Was it just a dream? Chi Mu still had some lingering fear in his heart. He couldn't sleep and could only stare at the bonfire that was about to burn out in a daze. Chi Mu, who was in a daze, didn't notice that Su Wan, who was on the other side, moved her body without a trace. Her breathing was disorderly for a moment and finally gradually calmed down. In the end, was it a dream? Chapter 21. Chi Mu didn't sleep the whole time. When the sun rose, his eyes were already bloodshot. When Su Wan and Fang Tian woke up, Chi Mu opened his travel bag and took out 2 cans of food and a bag of compressed biscuits. Wow, there's actually canned food. Big brother Chi, you're so well prepared. Do you often go to the wild to play? Fang Tian's eyes sparkled as soon as she saw delicious food. Chi Mu just smiled. I'm an expert at surviving in the wild. You'll know in the future. A man who doesn't know how to survive in the wild is not a good husband. Su Wan. Fang Tian. The 3 people hurriedly ate something and then began to discuss how to get out. Chi Mu forgot about the things in his dream, but Su Wan still remembered it very clearly. Not knowing what kind of thoughts she had, Su Wan directly suggested a direction. That was the direction where they met Qin Lu in the dream. The other 2 people didn't object. The 3 people packed up their belongings and resolutely walked in a direction. Just like in a dream, they walked for a day. It was calm and peaceful. The 3 people didn't encounter any danger and didn't find a lost companion. Seeing that the sun was about to set, Fang Tian seemed to be a little anxious. Her eyes were red. Her footsteps were somewhat disorderly, as if she wanted to get out as soon as possible, but there was no way to go. That kind of panic and despair made Fang Tian's complexion extremely pale. Right at this time, a light that wasn't considered bright was suddenly projected from the other side of the jungle. This sudden light caused Fang Tian, who was already in a panic, to cry out. Along with her voice, the light also trembled a bit. Who's there? Get out here for this old woman. The girl who was full of energy had the air of a ruffian. This voice is Bai Xiaoyu. Fang Tian's voice carried a sobbing tone, but at this moment, her mood was really excited because she recognized this voice. This was the voice of her roommate, Bai Xiaoyu. Hearing Bai Xiaoyu's voice, Su Wan was also a bit surprised. When she chose this direction, she really just wanted to try her luck. Didn't expect that she would actually encounter a companion here. Not long after, Bai Xiaoyu appeared in front of the 3 people. She had dyed her long dark purple hair, and she was also wearing black tights. Her wrists were adorned with strings of exaggerated jewelry. This outfit was so dazzling that Su Wan didn't dare to look at it. Bai Xiaoyu was born in a society. Her father was the leader of a large local society. Everyone called him Boss Bai. Boss Bai had a daughter when he was old. In this life, he only had Bai Xiaoyu, this one precious daughter. It could be imagined that Bai Xiaoyu grew up under Boss Bai's extreme doting. But she was clearly a fair and cute little girl, but somehow, she grew up crooked and became like this. Suwon felt that boss Bai must be the most vexed person. Bai Xiao Wan was the three. Bai Xiao Yu saw the figures of the three of them and stared at Chi Mu meaningfully. Only then did she open her mouth to ask. I met him on the way. Suwon was the first to answer. Bai Xiao Yu, are you alone here? When Bai Xiao Yu heard Suwon's question, she subconsciously looked at Chi Mu. After a moment of silence, she answered in a low voice. Only myself. Don't worry, the four of us will travel together in the future. We'll definitely find them. Fong Tian, who had already returned to normal, immediately took a step forward. As she spoke, she raised her hand to pat Bai Xiao Yu's shoulder. The moment Fong Tian's hand came into contact with Bai Xiao Yu's shoulder, the flesh and blood on her hand instantly dissipated, leaving only white and sharp knuckles. Without hesitation, she pierced into Bai Xiao Yu's shoulder. In the blink of an eye, black blood splattered onto the ground, causing the grass and wildflowers on the ground to wither in an instant. Let's go. Fong Tian's arms and even her upper body were constantly changing. Her flesh and blood were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even so, the white skeleton that had lost its flesh and blood still turned around with difficulty. The skeleton made an unpleasant sound of friction. As the teeth closed and closed, a dark and unpleasant voice came out of its mouth. Hurry up and go. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Suwon looked on helplessly as Fong Tian turned into a skeleton. She looked on helplessly as a large amount of black blood gushed out from Bai Xiao Yu's body. Her dark purple hair grew longer and longer. The crazy long hair covered her face and even covered her whole body. Those long hair fluttered in the air. First, it wrapped around Fong Tian's skeleton. Then, it rushed towards Suwon and Chi Mu's direction. Go. This time, Suwon's hands were quick. She pulled Chi Mu and turned around to run. Chi Mu usually liked to survive in the wild. His physical strength was naturally very good. But he didn't expect that Suwon's physical strength was also this good. The two of them ran all the way, and she was actually able to keep up with his speed. What the hell is going on here? While running, Chi Mu couldn't help but mutter to himself. Fong Tian and Bai Xiao Yu wouldn't have been possessed by ghosts, right? Thinking about the situation just now, Chi Mu still felt his scalp tingle. Suwon didn't speak and didn't look back. She just ran all the way until a ghostly shadow blocked their way. There was no moonlight or stars in the dense forest. The surroundings were pitch black. They could only hear Suwon and Chi Mu's violent gasps. That shadow stood silently under the tree, blending into one with the night. It carried a chill that made people's hearts palpitate. Dark purple hair wildly danced in the night and jet black blood dyed her body. The existence in front of them was no longer Bai Xiao Yu. Instead, it was a female ghost without a face and her hair wildly danced. The female ghost stood fixedly not far from Suwon and Chi Mu. Those strange strands of hair danced like a turbulent undercurrent, pouncing on the two people's faces. This moment came suddenly, but Suwon's gaze congealed. At the juncture of life and death, she suddenly pushed Chi Mu, who was beside her, away. I don't like to owe other people favors. Her voice hadn't fallen when Suwon suddenly opened her eyes. The early morning wind carried a trace of coolness. Beside them was the bonfire that had long been extinguished. The sky was cold and the dew was heavy. Suwon subconsciously shrunk her body. Fong Tian, who had been leaning on her, slowly woke up because of Suwon's movements in the room. Morning, ah. Fong Tian was still in a daze. She subconsciously moved her stiff and numb limbs and couldn't help but complain. It's so cold, ah. If there was a tent, it would be good. Speaking up to hear, her stomach suddenly made a goo-goo sound. This made the always lively and cheerful Fong Tian couldn't help but blush. A bit hungry. Suwon, what do you want to eat? I also have a bag of biscuits in my backpack. Eat can food. Suwon stood up and walked over the bonfire, directly arriving in front of Chi Mu. Chi Mu was still sleeping very deeply. His eyes were tightly closed, and his complexion wasn't very good. Suwon went around to Chi Mu's back and opened his backpack. She took out 2 cans of canned food from inside. Sure enough, even the taste and brand of the canned food was exactly the same as in her dream. Wow, There's actually kin food? Fong Tian couldn't help but be speechless. This Chi Dage's preparations are really complete. One look, and you can tell that he's an expert in surviving in the wild.
And, speaking of which,
Fong Tian didn't know what to think and suddenly turned her face to look at Suwon. Suwon, how did you know that there are kin food in his backpack? I inadvertently saw it. Suwon casually replied. Fong Tian glanced at Suwon and then glanced at the soundly asleep Chimu. Minding her own business, she muttered something and turned around to fight with the canned food that Suwon handed to her. When the two people were almost done eating, Chimu sat up dripping with sweat. You're awake? Suwon, who had been distracted paying attention to Chimu's movements, immediately asked a question. Chapter 22. Is the dream constantly overlapping, or have we always been in a dream? Suwon clearly knew that she was in the ninth nightmare's world, but everything in this world was completely different from the world she originally knew. Unknowingly, everything deviated from the original track. Unknowingly, who was controlling everything? Chimu's mental state wasn't very good after he woke up this time. Suwon already understood a lot of things from the way he looked at her and Fong Tian. He must remember that dream. After a simple breakfast, the three people began to discuss their next itinerary. Chimu began to be absent-minded, and Fong Tian never had her own opinions. We're not going anywhere. Finally, it was Suwon who made the final decision. We'll wait here. If they are really in this forest, they will definitely find us. Yes, in fact, Suwon had already made up her mind. This time, she wouldn't take the initiative to attack. She would wait for the rabbit to come to her. Hearing Suwon's words, Fong Tian nodded her head. Chimu only looked at Suwon thoughtfully and didn't oppose in the end. Waiting was the most unbearable thing. Time seemed to be extended infinitely at this time. This day, it seemed to be especially slow. With great difficulty, it was night time. Fong Tian habitually leaned on Suwon's side, wanting to absorb some warmth. And Chimu, whose eyes were blue and obviously lacked sleep, kept staring blankly at the bonfire. Why aren't you sleeping? Suwon used a small branch to fiddle with the bonfire. She raised her eyes and curiously looked at Chimu. Chimu opened his mouth. He didn't dare to sleep. He was afraid that once he fell asleep, he would fall into a nightmare again. That kind of feeling was too terrifying. Suwon, do you believe that in this world, there are ghosts? Chimu thought for a long time and finally couldn't help but ask Suwon. Ghosts? Suwon pursed her lips. Not knowing what she was thinking, she somewhat unconcernedly replied, even if there are ghosts, so what? Will they be scarier than people? Suwon always felt that the most terrifying, most frightening, and most vicious thing in this world was always the human heart. Regarding this point, no one was clearer than her. Suwon's mood inexplicably became somewhat gloomy. It seemed that she accidentally recalled some memories that should have been forgotten. She forced herself to take a few deep breaths. Her gaze and mind once again settled down. Chimu, who was at the side, began to stare blankly after hearing Suwon's answer. The silence between the two continued to spread. Time ticked by. Suwon couldn't sleep either. She was waiting for the prologue of the night, or perhaps waiting for a chance to end it. Unknowingly, it was already deep into the night. There was a slightly cold mountain breeze blowing through the forest. Suwon subconsciously shrunk her body. Chimu, who was at the side, was still holding on. Seeing him holding his phone and continuously playing games there, Suwon simply turned her body and looked at the other side. Fuck. Right at this time, Chimu, who was behind him, suddenly angrily threw his cell phone. After enduring for so long, it's still not 11 o'clock. The night is long. How am I supposed to get through it? Suwon turned around and her gaze fell on Chimu. Did I disturb you? Perhaps the successive nightmares made Chimu irritable, but in front of a beauty, he still maintained his elegant image. I'm fine. Suwon's gaze moved and directly fell on Chimu's phone screen. What time is it? She asked subconsciously. 10:50. Chimu weakly replied, completely not noticing Suwon's surprised expression that was not far away. Right at this time, the sound of messy footsteps suddenly came from the forest. Suwon and Chimu looked at each other, and both of them held their breath. Chimu even took out a small military knife from the backpack beside him. As for the two figures that suddenly appeared, they seemed to have seen the fire here and stumbled out of the dense forest. It's you guys. When Suwon saw the faces of those two people, she didn't know if she should breathe a sigh of relief or be more cautious. That's right. These two people were Ming Ting Yao and Fan Shujun. In the previous two dreams, Suwon had already seen the other four people. Suwon also guessed that she would see Fan Shujun and Ming Ting Yao this time, but the way they met was a bit different from what she thought. Right now, Ming Ting Yao was being supported by Fan Shujun. One of her legs was still seeping with blood stains. Although she cut a sorry figure, Ming Ting Yao deserved to be called a flower on a high mountain. Even if she had fallen to this point, she still maintained her charming elegance. At this time, seeing the bonfire in front of her, as well as Suwon and Chimu, Ming Ting Yao's pair of good-looking eyes somewhat astonished fell on Suwon and Chimu. I didn't think that you two would be together. Hearing Ming Ting Yao's words, Suwon's heart shivered. Chimu's expression also greatly changed as he looked behind Suwon over there. It was empty. Fong Tian, who was leaning on Suwon and sleeping soundly, actually disappeared into thin air. What's wrong? Perhaps it was because Suwon and Chimu's expressions were too unsightly at the moment. Ming Ting Yao also subconsciously looked behind Suwon and thoughtfully asked, "Is there something wrong?" Fong Tian. Chimu took a deep breath and somewhat trembled as he said this name. She has always been with us. Just a moment ago, she was still here. Fong Tian? Ming Ting Yao wrinkled her brows. Fan Shujun, who had been supporting her at the side, suddenly spoke in a low voice with some uncertainty. "Did you see Fong Tian wearing blue sportswear?" "How did you know?" Suwon and Chimu happened to look at Fan Shujun at the same time. Fan Shujun, who was originally very embarrassed because he was supporting Ming Ting Yao, after hearing the two people's question, his expression became even more embarrassed. "That, actually, is..." Fan Shujun subconsciously used one hand to push up the glasses on the bridge of his nose. "Don't you guys feel that this place is very strange?" "Nonsense. You changing the topic like this is also very stiff. Don't you feel it?" Although it didn't match with her own persona, at this moment, Suwon really wanted to roll her eyes. However, Fan Shujun's following words made Suwon hold her breath. "I don't know if you guys have played the game Second World. The protagonist of this game can wander between two parallel universes at will and simultaneously live two different lives. At that time, he thought that he had the superpower to cross space, but in reality, he has always been living in an overlapping dream world. That world is called the Second World. In the Second World, everyone has the right to control their own dream world. In that world, they can do as they please and realize all of their wishes and dreams. You're not trying to say that we're in that wonderful second world, right? Really seeing a ghost." Chimu's voice was somewhat hoarse, but there was even more anxiety. "If it's really a dream world that you can control at will, that would be great." God knows what he dreamt of. The experience of being chased by a female ghost was simply too horrifying, okay? "Actually, I'm just making an analogy." Hearing Chimu's words, Fan Shujun somewhat bashfully lowered his eyes, and Suwon deeply looked at Fan Shujun. She thought of that phone call from Fan Shujun. On the phone, he kept saying the ninth. What did the ninth represent? What did he want to express in the end? And the words he didn't finish saying, that Ming word, did it represent Ming Ting Yao? Did you guys also encounter strange things? Suwon suddenly looked at Ming Ting Yao and asked with an incomparably serious expression. Ming Ting Yao's gaze slightly flickered. At this time, you must tell the truth. Suwon couldn't help but add a sentence. Ming Ting Yao hesitated for a moment. Finally, she slowly sat beside the bonfire. The light of the fire reflected on her fair and delicate face. At this moment, Ming Ting Yao's complexion seemed somewhat pale. Before I met Fan Shujun, I was always alone in the woods. Seemingly thinking of something, Ming Ting Yao subconsciously bit her lips. Later, I met Qin Lu and Bai Xiao one after another, but what happened to them? Qi Mu, who was at the side, began to question closely. It was very obvious that he also felt that perhaps Ming Ting Yao also encountered a similar situation as him. They all died. Chapter 23. They're all dead. Suwon said this sentence with absolute certainty. The three people at the side all happened to look at Suwon at the same time. Suwon, did you also dream? Chimu suddenly stared at Suwon and asked somewhat eagerly. Yes, I also had a strange dream. Also, Suwon's gaze flashed past the three people. If I didn't guess wrong, right now, we're still in a dream. Layer after layer of dreams. When we wake up from the dream, we think we're awake. In fact, we've just passed from a layer of dreams to a deeper layer of dreams. This was the truly terrifying part of a nightmare. It will make you live forever in the dream, unable to escape and unable to return. How is this possible? Chimu, who was the oldest and had the most experience, was the first to lose his cool. Perhaps, to him, this statement was really too fantastical, making it hard for him to accept. In contrast, Meng Tingyao was much calmer. She knitted her brows and still had an aloof appearance. Fan Shujun, on the other hand, raised his eyes and glanced at Suwon. The eyes behind the lenses flashed with an unknown radiance. Dream world? Is it like the existence of Inception? Then, is there also a node that can connect to reality? Fan Shujun asked several questions in a row. His tone faintly carried a trace of excitement. That's why it's said that the mind of a game geek, ordinary people simply can't understand. However, Suwon was very concerned about Fan Shujun. This geek was absolutely not simple. That's right, this node that connects to reality does exist. Suwon took out her cell phone from her bag and shook it in front of everyone. My cell phone's time has always stopped at 10:50 p.m. I think I can roughly know when I was pulled into this endless loop of dreams. It was that 10:50 p.m. call from Fan Shujun. After the phone call was hung up, Suwon was pulled into this layer of dreams. That node. What is it? Meng Tingyao, who had been silent all this time, finally set her gaze on Suwon. Her gaze carried a trace of inquiry and also some suspicion. I don't know. Suwon shook her head. Perhaps we should first find Easy Xian and Chen Yufeng. This way, we might be able to find a way to return to reality. Hearing Suwon's words, Meng Tingyao's gaze flashed. How do you know that Easy Xian and Chen Yufeng are still alive? If Fang Tian and the others died, then Easy Xian and the others might also have died. Even the Suwon and Chimu in front of them. Meng Tingyao only felt chills all over her body. She didn't dare to continue thinking. Easy Xuan won't die, Suwon said resolutely and decisively. As this world's #1 male lead, how could Easy Xian die so easily? You're quite confident in him. Regarding Suwon and Easy Xian's relationship, Meng Tingyao was also very clear. The two people's breakup couldn't be said who was right and who was wrong. Suwon was born in the city and wanted to pursue the life she wanted, while Easy Xian came from the mountains and wholeheartedly wanted to achieve success and repay his fellow villagers in the mountains. The two people's dreams were diametrically opposed. At that time, they were so affectionate and sweet together, but it was just normal opposites attracting each other. Although Meng Tingyao and Suwon had always been living in the same dormitory, they didn't interact much with each other. She didn't really understand Suwon's character. Right now, she was even more doubtful of her. This night, the four people sat around the bonfire and took turns to rest. The night passed without anything happening. The next day, the few people still discussed that they still had to wait by the tree stump for a hare. They waited in the same place. Unfortunately, this wait lasted for 3 days. Although nothing strange happened in these 3 days, Easy Xian and Chen Yufeng's figures still didn't appear. At this time, the four people didn't have much food and water left. Tomorrow, we'll go find them. In the deep night, Chi Mu's voice was particularly tired. Continuing like this isn't a solution. We can only do this. Meng Tingyao looked at Chi Mu and then looked at Suwon. Suwon also faintly nodded. As for Fan Shujun, who had the lowest sense of existence at the side, he kept his head down and minding his own business playing games. It was as if the place he was in right now wasn't a strange mountain forest, but a big bed in the dormitory. Just like the past few days, everyone took turns to rest. When it was Suwon's turn to be on night duty, she saw that Fan Shujun still hadn't slept. But this time, he didn't play games. Instead, He stared blankly at the night sky that was covered by the leaves. What are you thinking about? Suwon quietly sat next to Fan Shu-jun and seriously looked at him. Right now, Fan Shu-jun took off his thick glasses. This was also the first time Suwon sized up Fan Shu-jun's appearance. Actually, his eyes were very good. Because he didn't go out for a long time, Fan Shu-jun's skin was also very white. His handsome facial features matched with his slightly pale skin. He didn't look like a dead otaku at all. Not thinking about anything. Bored, in a daze. Fan Shu-jun turned his face and looked at Suwon with misty eyes. Suwon knew that right now, Fan Shu-jun couldn't see her expression clearly. Because he was highly myopic, when he didn't wear glasses, his gaze was misty. Did you dream of Fong Tian? Even if she knew that Fan Shu-jun couldn't see her gaze, Suwon still habitually stared at Fan Shu-jun's eyes. And, hesitating, Fan Shu-jun still nodded his head. I dreamed of her. In the dream, Fong Tian wore a set of blue sportswear. Fan Shu-jun gently closed his eyes, as if he was recalling something. Blue clothes. Suwon wrinkled her brows. This wasn't the first time Fan Shu-jun mentioned that set of clothes. That set of clothes? Fong Tian never wears blue clothes. Perhaps it was because he closed his eyes, or perhaps it was because he was too tired, but Fan Shu-jun's voice began to become very low and weak. She said that she likes blue, but blue doesn't match her skin color. So, in her own wardrobe, there's no objection that the clothes are blue. Because he cared too much about a person, he could always remember every word she said in his heart. Even in a dream, he couldn't forget it. Fong Tian, who liked blue but was never willing to wear blue. When she appeared in front of him wearing a set of blue sportswear, Fan Shu-jun knew that he was dreaming. So it turned out that Fan Shu-jun liked Fong Tian. Suwon couldn't help but understand. If it was in reality, this damn otaku wouldn't have revealed this secret no matter what, right? Because this was in a dream. So, Suwon's eyes suddenly brightened. What is a dream? How does a nightmare control a dream? It can make everyone fall into a nightmare that it weaves and be unable to escape, but it can't control people's innermost selves. Just like Fong Tian. She clearly liked blue and was unwilling to wear it because she loved her beauty. But in her dream, she had self-awareness and she wore blue clothes. Just like Chimu. In reality, he was a swift and decisive company executive and was also a hedonistic young master who showed mercy everywhere. But in the dream, he was more impatient and fearful than anyone else. And what was unexpected was that he actually had the side of a good family man. Another example was Fan Shu-jun, an introverted and silent otaku. In this world, he was more sensitive and clear-headed than anyone else. If in this world, everyone could reflect their innermost selves, then where was Easy Shin right now? What was he doing? Suwon thought of that bamboo building again. In a certain layer of the dream, she saw that bamboo building. That bamboo building made her feel strange, but also very familiar. Thinking about it now, wasn't that the bamboo building that Easy Shin drew for her in the original owner's memory? So, the existence of the bamboo building, the appearance of Easy Shin, was that also a reflection of Suwon's innermost feelings? The original owner actually couldn't let go of that feeling. There was also Fong Tian. If the bamboo building was the original owner's longing for Easy Shin, then Fong Tian was the reflection of Suwon's innermost feelings. From the moment she woke up, she was schemed against. Suwon still remembered that the first person she saw after waking up was Fong Tian. She naturally thought that she was in the first layer of the dream and Fong Tian would be the first to die. So in the subsequent layers of the dream, Fong Tian continuously turned into a skeleton in front of Suwon. Everything was because her heart had long since determined that Fong Tian would die. That's why she had that kind of dream. Then, what if she was replaced with Easy Shin? Suwon slowly closed her eyes. She imagined Easy Shin's encounter in the dream. When Easy Shin realized that he had suddenly and inexplicably appeared in a strange mountain forest, what would he do? Suwon's mind slowly outlined Easy Shin's face. He stood in the dark forest without a single soul. First, he had a look of shock on his face. Then, Easy Shin would unhesitatingly activate his ability, Time Reversal. It was Time Reversal. With EZ Shin's personality, he wouldn't passively take a beating. He would activate his ability at the first moment and return to the past. Then, he would make a move after making a plan. So, EZ Shin wouldn't appear here. In the nightmare of this mountain forest, EZ Shin's figure wouldn't appear. Truly regretful, Suwon sighed softly. Since there was no way to meet EZ Shin here, then what was the point of staying here? It's time for me to wake up. Suwon closed her eyes at ease. When she opened her eyes again, she saw snow-white walls and sky-blue curtains. Here was the city's affiliated hospital's single-patient ward. Suwon's forehead was a bit painful. She gently lifted her hand and discovered that her forehead was wrapped in layers of bandages. It seemed like she was injured. It was a bit painful. Suwon suddenly smiled. She knew that she came out. She came out of her own dreamland. But she didn't know whose dreamland she entered this time. That's right. The layers and layers of dreamland in the wilderness were actually Suwon's own dreamland. From the time she was attacked by the bats in the forest, Suwon felt a trace of strangeness. She left behind the tissue that she used to wipe her blood. Later, she discovered that there wasn't a trace of blood on the tissue. Then, she encountered danger in the deeper layer of the dreamland and was saved by Chimu. At the last critical moment, Suwon thought of letting Chimu wake up. As a result, Chimu really woke up. Nightmares were omnipresent and pervasive. But there was a major premise that they could only sneak into other people's dreams and do whatever they wanted in other people's dreams. From that time on, Suwon knew that she had been schemed against by the nightmare from the moment she entered this world. Chapter 24. You group of youngsters are really lucky, ah. The nearly 40-year-old head nurse couldn't help but mutter while changing Suwon's dressing. That mountain road often collapses, ah. On the day you guys had an accident, another place also collapsed. Those people weren't so lucky. A few people died in the car. This matter was reported in the newspaper. It said that the $1 million luxury car was also scrapped. It's really a pity. Mountain road, car accident. Suwon slowly closed her eyes. In her memory was the scene of sitting in the business car that day. When they were halfway, there was a huge car accident in front of them. The road was blocked. Chimu had no choice but to turn around and take another small road. Afterwards, it turned out that there was a car accident. No wonder her head hurt so much and her memory was so vague. Don't know how the others are. EZ Shin? Head nurse. Suwon thought of this and immediately called out to the head nurse who was about to leave. My classmates, the companions who were in the same car as me, are they all right? Oh, you asked them, ah. 2 of them only had scratches. This morning, they were taken out of the hospital by their family members. There are 4 people with similar injuries to you who still need to stay in the hospital for observation. The remaining 2 with more serious injuries are still unconscious in the intensive care unit. But after tonight, there shouldn't be any danger to their lives. Finished speaking, the head nurse turned around and quickly left. Suwon struggled to get up and wore the slippers on the ground and slowly walked out of her ward. She kept inquiring along the way and finally successfully arrived outside EZ Shin's ward. Through the small window at the door of the ward, she could see the scene inside. EZ Shin didn't stay in a single ward. The person who stayed with him was Qin Lu. Right now, the 2 people were sitting on the bed, their bodies facing each other as if they were chatting. Suwon looked at the bandage on EZ Shin's arm. Seeing that he didn't have any major problems, she finally relaxed. She hesitated and was about to leave when EZ Shin suddenly felt something and looked towards the door. The 2 people's gazes unexpectedly met. Seeing that EZ Shin was stunned, Suwon awkwardly pushed the door and entered. Suwon? Qin Lu looked at Suwon and then glanced at EZ Shin on the other bed. You came to see us? And Suwon responded in a low voice. Are you 2 all right? I'm fine. Qin Lu laughed heartily. We only suffered minor injuries. It's not a big deal. How are you? I'm fine too. It's just that my head hurts sometimes. Suwon gently rubbed her forehead. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't remember it no matter what. Every time she had a headache, she would be in so much pain that her consciousness would become fuzzy. When the pain passed, she would feel uncomfortable all over. She always felt that she was missing something important in her memory, but she just couldn't remember it. Did he hit his head in the car accident? You have to check it carefully. Qinlu saw that Su-won seemed to have a worried expression and couldn't help but remind her. I will. Su-won nodded and seemed to have thought of something. She couldn't help but ask, Qinlu, I heard from the head nurse that there is still someone who hasn't woken up in the intensive care unit. Who is it, ah? It's Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiaoyu. Speaking of this matter, Qinlu's complexion wasn't very good. At that time, the two of them were sitting at the furthest back, and according to those doctors at that time, the rock that fell from the mountain just happened to hit the rear of our car. So that's how it was. Su-won carefully recalled everyone's seats at that time. Chimu sat in the driver's seat at the very front, and Fan Shujun sat in the front passenger seat. When they just got on the car, the two people seemed to have discussed a lot about playing games. Behind Chimu was herself and Fang Tian. On Fang Tian's right was Ming Ting Yao. In the back row sat Yi Xin, Fan Shujun, and Chen Yufeng. Bai Xiaoyu, who always didn't get along, sat alone in the last row. On the road, Su-won had been listening to songs with Fang Tian. Later, Chimu took the initiative to look for her to chat, so she chatted with him from time to time. She never looked back to look at the scene behind her. According to what Qinlu said, when the accident happened, Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiaoyu were sitting together. Perhaps at that time, Chen Yufeng just happened to run to the back and had something to talk to Bai Xiaoyu about? Then he was really quite unlucky. After leaving Qinlu and Yi Xian's ward, Su-won asked around again. Afterwards, she found Fang Tian and Ming Ting Yao's ward to take a look. The two people also didn't have any major problems. Fang Tian was still the same as before, timid and talkative. She pulled Su-won and talked endlessly. Between her words, she always thought that she was very secretive about Qinlu's injuries. Actually, Fang Tian liked Qinlu. This wasn't any secret. Only Fang Tian thought that she hid her feelings very well. Only Qinlu was so slow that he couldn't see through her thoughts. Su-won also went to look at Ming Ting Yao. The relationship between the two people was ordinary. Ming Ting Yao wasn't a talkative person. She had always been like a goddess high above. Su-won felt that this kind of person was never in the same world as her. Just like this hospitalization, everyone stayed in the ordinary ward. Although Ming Ting Yao also had a minor injury, she stayed in the VIP room on the 5th floor, and there was also a special nurse to take care of her. Although the teacher said that everyone was equal, Su-won felt that people were divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades from birth. This isn't something you can choose yourself. Just like her, just like Yi Xian, just like people like Ming Ting Yao and Chen Yufeng. Chen Yufeng and the others were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. Their lives were superior, and they didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But Yi Xian was poor since childhood and had no choice but to rely on himself. As for Su-won herself, she was born in an ordinary worker's family. Although she wasn't as poor as Yi Xian, she was always very clear about the hardships of her parents' work. So half a year ago, when Yi Xian suddenly said that he wanted to bring her back to that small mountain village after graduation, Su-won refused. She didn't want to suffer, but more than that, she didn't want her parents to continue suffering. Say that she was materialistic or vain, she always rationally believed that love wasn't everything in life. She wanted to live a better life. She pursued a better living environment for herself and her family. What's wrong with this? Returning to her own ward, Su-won was very tired. When she closed her eyes, she could always recall everything in the past. She lightly sighed, some feelings. The past is the past. Unknowingly, Su-won's breathing evened out and she fell asleep. The ward was gloomy. The blue curtains of the window suddenly shook violently at an unknown time, as if it was forcefully pulled to both sides. As the curtains were pulled, you could see the clean window and the moonlight outside. Chapter 25. Su-won only stayed in the hospital for 3 days. After that, she was picked up by her parents and discharged from the hospital. The originally planned Labor Day holiday was inexplicably ruined. Fortunately, there were still 3 days for her to rest at home. Xiao-won, Mom and Dad are leaving. You lock the door and sleep early tonight. Her mother's warning came from the living room, and then Su-won heard the sound of the door closing. For a lot of people, the Labor Day holiday was a very hard day for Soo-won's parents. They were busy working overtime and selling goods in the factory. So it can be said that real working people, where would they have the leisure time to celebrate Labor Day? As usual, Soo-won locked the door and then changed into her pajamas to watch entertainment programs for a while. At 9:00 sharp, she returned to her room to sleep. Soo family's house was a 1.5 bedroom. Soo-won's father and mother naturally lived in the big bedroom. Soo-won's room was very small. In addition to a single bed, there was also a 1.2-meter wardrobe and a 2-tiered multi-purpose study table. Right now, Soo-won was lying on the bed as usual and conveniently turned off the lights in the room. The bedroom was pitch black, and in this quiet darkness, Soo-won gradually fell asleep. The heavy rain was pouring down and an Audi was speeding along the winding mountain road. "Chimu, be careful and drive. This rain is too heavy. How about we find a place to stop and rest?" Who was talking in the car? So noisy. "Stop? Do you fucking want to die?" It was Chimu's voice. She didn't know why, but Soo-won felt that this person's voice was particularly familiar. This mountain road has 18 turns, and the line of sight isn't good under the heavy rain. Once we stop, aren't we waiting to be hit and sent flying? Even if there are no cars coming and going, what if the mountain rocks collapse and there's a mudslide or something? Chimu seemed somewhat flustered and exasperated. He knew that as long as he went out with Chen Yufeng, nothing good would happen. He shouldn't have agreed to be this nuisance's coolie driver in the first place. Chimu, be serious. Look at the road. Look at the road, ah. Fan Shu-jun's voice was very low and carried a bit of apprehension. Following Fan Shu-jun's voice, the Audi slipped a few times on the mountain road, swaying left and right. Soo-won felt that her body was violently swaying, and her forehead ruthlessly hit the seat in front. So painful. Soo-won painfully rubbed her forehead. She raised her head and saw Fan Shu-jun's somewhat pale face in front of her. He seemed to be very nervous. Outside the car window, the heavy rain poured down, completely blurring everyone's line of sight. Soo-won was somewhat dazed. She didn't know where she was for a long time. What a familiar feeling, but also very strange. This kind of specious feeling made Soo-won's head start to ache again. "Don't touch me. I have nothing to say to you." At this time, Bai Xiaoyu's sharp voice came from the back of the car. Hey, speak properly. When did I touch you? I just wanted to ask you for a favor. Do you have to dislike me so much? After all, we're all classmates." This was Chen Yufeng's voice. Soo-won turned her head and saw Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiaoyu sitting behind everyone. Bai Xiaoyu's complexion was very bad, but Chen Yufeng's face was one of forbearance, as if he still wanted to say something to Bai Xiaoyu. "Classmate?" Hearing Chen Yufeng's words, Bai Xiaoyu shot him a disdainful glance. Just as she opened her mouth to say something, Ezi Xian, who was sitting in front of the two people, suddenly shouted, "Chimu, stop the car. Stop the car immediately." Ezi Xian's voice came suddenly and very loud. Soo-won thought that she understood Ezi Xian very well, so in that sentence just now, she felt Ezi Xian's fear. That's right. He was afraid. Very afraid. What was he afraid of? The ear-piercing sound of the brakes rang. The rear of the car swayed a bit, but it still steadily stopped by the roadside. "I say, what are you all doing?" Chimu turned his body sideways and turned his head to look at the people in the car. The dissatisfaction in his gaze was obvious. Right at this time, a flash of lightning streaked across the sky. Soo-won only felt her eyes go white. Opening her eyes from her sleep, Soo-won's gaze went from muddled to clear and gradually became incomparably frightened. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Soo-won widened her eyes and motionlessly looked at the ceiling of her bedroom. Something was dripping from the ceiling drop by drop. Soo-won's heart tightened and her body stiffened. The feeling of fright rushed into her brain from her limbs and bones. What is it? In the darkness, there seemed to be something moving on the ceiling. That thing slowly converged into a number. 5. Soo-won couldn't help but open her mouth. The moment her voice came out, the number on the ceiling suddenly magnified dozens of times, occupying the entire roof. Like a boulder, it fiercely smashed down towards Soo-won's body. Soo-won was in a trance for a moment. When she regained consciousness again, She saw gravel all over the ground and bloodstains all over the ground. The torrential rain continued. A black Audi was crushed by countless gravel. The car had long been seriously deformed. From the gaps between the gravel, she could see a few arms powerlessly swinging, as if seeking the final redemption. Blood mixed with the rain and dyed the entire road scarlet red. Suwon felt cold all over, and a chill ran down her spine. Car accident. Luxury car. The car accident that the head nurse said that several people died was this one. Yes, they didn't encounter the scene of a car accident on that mountain road and didn't take a detour. The luxury car that was flattened by a mountain rock was Chen Yufeng's Audi that several of them were riding in. They got into a car accident. Some died, and some were unconscious. Suwon suddenly remembered everything now. They were trapped in a dream world. Here, the living had to find the people who really died in the car accident and kill them again to end the dream. And those who died had to think of ways to kill the living in the dream to seize their chance of survival. This was a nightmare world without any bottom line or human feelings. If you want to live, you can't be soft-hearted. Once you are soft-hearted, it means losing your life. The lamp in the bedroom was turned on by someone. Suwon sat on the bed with a pale face. Looking at the alarm clock beside the bed, Suwon shrunk her body and clenched her hands tightly. What did the Arabic number 5 represent? 5 people? Or 5 ghosts? Am I a human or a ghost right now? Despair and panic that she had never felt before surrounded Suwon tightly in the center. Her tightly clenched hands loosened and her arms tightly hugged her knees. Dong dong dong. Dong dong dong. At this time, there was a sudden and loud knock on the door of Suwon's house. Suwon seemed to be frightened and subconsciously wanted to shrink herself in the quilt, but the knocking outside the door became more and more urgent and forceful. Who is it? The hands of the alarm clock showed the current time, 12:30 midnight. The knocking at the door in the middle of the night was strange and dangerous everywhere. Suwon, open the door. It seemed that the person who knocked on the door was impatient. He finally shouted at the sturdy security door. This voice is... Chapter 26. A familiar voice came intermittently through the door. In this quiet night, it seemed especially abrupt and ear-piercing. Suwon frantically ran off the bed. She didn't care about wearing slippers and stumbled all the way to the living room. Because she was too flustered, her knee knocked against the glass coffee table in the middle of the living room. But right now, Suwon didn't have time to care about this. Her fingers trembled as she opened the door lock and saw the familiar figure standing at the door. Without hesitation, she threw herself into that person's embrace. Zixin, Zixin, is that you? Suwon's voice was full of panic and a pair of slender arms tightly embraced the man in front of her. Suwon. Zixin's voice sunk. It's me, are you all right? When Suwon heard Zixin's question, her eyes immediately reddened. Zixin, I'm so scared, I'm so scared. What should I do? What should I do? She frantically raised her head, a pair of watery eyes filled with fear. Don't be scared. Zixin's voice seemed to have some kind of magic that gradually calmed Suwon's emotions. You're home alone? Zixin glanced at the dark living room. He had just knocked on the door for a long time, and only Suwon ran out. It seems that her parents went to work the night shift again.
And
Suwon responded and seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly jumped out of Zixin's embrace. That? Come in and sit. Turning around and turning on the ceiling light in the living room, Suwon somewhat unnaturally pulled at the collar of her pajamas and lowered her head, a little afraid to meet Zixin's gaze. After all, they already broke up. What happened to your knee? Zixin's eyes were sharp, and he saw Suwon's bruised knee with a glance. There was already blood seeping out, a deep red appearance. No, nothing. I accidentally knocked it just now. Suwon, who was no longer flustered, finally returned to her usual appearance. I'll go get water for you. Do you still want to drink green tea? No. Zixin sat on the sofa, his gaze very deep. Plain water is fine. Oh. Suwon's heart didn't feel good, but her face still reluctantly revealed a trace of a smile. Wait, I'll go to the kitchen and get it for you. Looking at her back as she turned and left, Easy Xian's gaze became even more complicated and hard to explain. Who should he trust in this world? Was Su Wan worth trusting? Actually, Easy Xian also didn't know if he should unreservedly believe in his ex-girlfriend or not. But now, compared to the other people in the dormitory, Su Wan was undoubtedly the most harmless one. Because he had a special ability, even if Su Wan had any evil intentions towards him, he could discover it at the first moment and control her. Easy Xian leaned on the sofa and gently closed his eyes. The moment of the accident flashed through his mind. The collapse of the mountain rocks was too sudden, and Easy Xian barely managed to activate time reversal at the last moment. Now that his ability had been upgraded to the 5th rank, he could reverse time by 30 seconds. After going back in time, they could still hear Qin Yufeng and Bai Xiaoyu quarreling in the car. But Easy Xian already couldn't care that much. He used all his strength and shouted for Qi Mu to stop the car. At that moment, he was terrified. It wasn't until Qi Mu stopped the car by the roadside did Easy Xian let out a long sigh of relief. Was he saved? No. When the accident happened again, Easy Xian was completely dumbfounded. Flustered and exasperated, he once again reversed the flow of time. Again and again, even though he had already reversed the flow of time, the accidents still kept happening. At different times, at different locations, the only thing that was the same was their fates. This was an unchangeable fate. When Easy Xian understood this point and opened his eyes again, he was already in the hospital ward. Here, drink some water. Su Wan held a cup of plain water and quietly stood in front of Easy Xian. Seeing him leaning tiredly on the sofa, Su Wan pursed her lips, hesitated, and still asked in a small voice, "Do you also know about that car accident, about this dreamlike world?" Easy Xian suddenly opened his eyes and a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. "Su Wan, do you believe me?" "I believe." Su Wan heavily nodded her head. "Why?" Easy Xian seriously looked at Su Wan's face, seemingly unwilling to let go of any minute changes in her expression. "Because you came to protect me at the first moment. Although we already broke up, but I believe you." Su Wan faintly smiled at Easy Xian, her gaze surprisingly bright. In that bright gaze, there was an unconcealable tenderness like water. And Easy Xian nodded, stood up and raised his hand to press down on Su Wan's shoulder. "Among everyone, I also believe in you the most. Su Wan, don't worry, I will protect you." Hearing Easy Xian's solemn vow, Su Wan's face couldn't help but turn a little red. "Then what do we do now? How do we find those ghosts?" Su Wan didn't believe that she would die. She felt that she was definitely truly alive. Hearing Su Wan's words, Easy Xian hesitated for a moment. He focused his gaze and fixedly looked at Su Wan. "Have you ever seen something very special, such as a mysterious number?" "Number?" Su Wan's gaze brightened. "5. I've seen the number 5 in my dreams." "Zixian, have you seen it before?" "You saw 5? Easy Xian's expression slightly changed. "What? Don't tell me that you didn't see 5? Su Wan felt Easy Xian's change and immediately asked nervously. "I saw 9. Easy Xian replied in a low voice. 9? Su Wan also froze for a good while. Originally, she thought that the number she saw was the number of people in the human and ghost camps, but Easy Xian saw 9. Then her thoughts must be wrong. Don't tell me that this number didn't represent the number of people, but rather the serial number of each person? Su Wan represented number 5 and Easy Xian was number 9. Chapter 28. In the narrow living room, a fresh and pleasant folk song was playing. Although the sound wasn't loud, it could still be heard clearly in this quiet night. Su Wan had already changed out of her pajamas and wore loose sportswear. She sat on one end of the sofa and Easy Xian sat on the other end of the sofa. He was the same as usual, wearing a simple shirt and blue jeans. In the past, Su Wan didn't feel that Easy Xian was very handsome and charming. Although Easy Xian became somewhat different in a short period of time after the two broke up, Su Wan still liked this kind of quiet and calm Easy Xian. She didn't really like the way he showed off his ability. That wasn't the person in her memory. "How about you go back and sleep? I'll help you keep watch." Because he knew that this was the world of dreams, Easy Xian had a bold guess. He felt that Su Wan's parents would definitely not appear again, and this night had become especially dangerous. So, he decided to stay. But seeing Su Wan accompany him with a tired face, Easy Xian thought about it and still decided to persuade her to go back and rest. After all, Su Wan's physical strength was limited, and she basically didn't have any fighting strength. She staying by his side, other than being a trustworthy teammate, she was basically useless. Hearing Easy Xian's words, Su Wan, who was on the sofa, rubbed her eyes in a daze. It's nothing. I can still persevere. Don't worry about me. You. Easy Xian still wanted to say something, but his voice suddenly stopped. He heard the sound of footsteps, especially hurried and heavy. Su Wan also became spirited at this time. She also heard the sound, and the footsteps were getting closer and closer. Finally, it stopped. Dong dong dong. Dong dong dong. Urgent knocking sounds rang out. Su Wan suddenly stood up from the sofa and looked at Easy Xian with a pale face. Easy Xian also stood up and made a shushing gesture at Su Wan. Who would come at this time? Easy Xian tiptoed to the door and looked out from the peephole of the security door. The person outside the door was holding the door with one hand, and his head was lowered. Easy Xian could not see his face and could only see the top of his head, but he could tell that the person was a man. He was tall and slender, wearing a beige shirt and gray trousers, and in the crook of the man's arm was a gray suit. The suit was stained with blood that had not yet dried and was very red. As if impatient from waiting, the person outside the door began to forcefully knock on the door again. The moment he raised his hand, Easy Xian finally saw the appearance of the person outside the door. It was Chimu. Easy Xian wrinkled his brows and turned to look at Su Wan behind him. He moved his lips and whispered in her ear, "It's Chimu. How did he know your address?" Chimu? Su Wan's face was puzzled. She thought for a long time. It seemed that when she was in the car, Chimu asked which district she lived in. But at that time, Su Wan only said the name of the district and didn't tell him which building she lived in. Su Wan quickly opened the door. Lousy is dying of pain. Chimu, who was outside the door, finally couldn't bear it anymore and began to shout loudly at the door. "I know you're at the door. Quickly open the door for me. I had a car accident." As he spoke, Chimu raised his arm and the side of his face at the peephole. Sure enough, there were injuries on the side of his face and his arm. Blood was still flowing nonstop. Should I open the door? Su Wan subconsciously looked at Easy Xian. Easy Xian leaned against Su Wan's ear and whispered a few words. Then he quietly turned around and left, hiding in Su Wan's parents' bedroom. Who? Su Wan took a deep breath and her fingers trembled as she placed them on the door lock. After hesitating for a moment, she finally closed her eyes and used force to open the door. Hiss. Chimu pressed on his wound as he quickly rushed into the room. Quickly closed the door. Not waiting for Su Wan's reaction, Chimu already forcefully closed the door and locked it twice. What are you doing? Su Wan vigilantly looked at the person in front of her. She wasn't familiar with Chimu. She only knew that he was Chun Yufeng's childhood friend and was a very rich playboy. What am I doing? Chimu raised his eyes and looked at Su Wan with a smile that wasn't a smile. The night is long and endless. What do you think I'm doing? You, don't come over. Su Wan retreated a few steps in panic. She casually picked up the ashtray on the coffee table and looked at Chimu vigilantly. Really can't help but tease. Chimu shook his head. Quickly go and find something to treat my wound. Otherwise, I'm afraid that before I get killed by the ghost, I'll torment myself to death. While speaking, Chimu didn't regard himself as an outsider and laid down on Su Wan's sofa. "AI, it's still your sofa that's comfortable. I really miss it." Miss what? Su Wan didn't understand what Chimu was saying at all. But looking at his arm that was still bleeding non-stop, Su Wan hesitated for a while and still found the family's medicine box in the small cabinet at the side of the living room. "There's only these. See which ones you can use." Su Wan pushed the medicine box in front of Chimu, and her tone was very cold. Chimu raised his eyebrows and skillfully bandaged his wound. He also took a mirror and applied some medicine to the small wound on his face. After doing all this, he looked down at the bloodstains on his body and frowned in disgust. "Xiao Wana, you see that my clothes are dirty. Go and help me get a set of clothes. I remember that Uncle's size is about the same as mine. I want that black set, the one in the left drawer of the wardrobe." As he spoke, Chimu leaned on the sofa and began to unbutton his shirt. "How do you know?" Suwon looked at Chimu with even more vigilance. Her father's figure was indeed about the same as Chimu's. Moreover, Suwon also knew that a few days ago, her mother bought a brand new black suit for her father. She planned to wear it to her grandmother's birthday banquet next month. At that time, Suwon put it in the wardrobe in the left drawer. "I just know." Chimu slightly raised his chin, narrowed his eyes, and looked at Suwon with a smile. "Moreover, I know more than this. In short, you'll follow me in the future. You're my woman. I will protect you." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Hearing Chimu's last sentence, Suwon's face sank. She subconsciously glanced at the bedroom where Zixin was hiding. I'm not familiar with you at all." "You say, did you follow me and investigate me? In the end, what are you trying to do?" Hearing Suwon's words, Chimu wrinkled his brows. His gaze changed from frivolous to complicated and hard to explain. "Suwon, at this time, is there any meaning in continuing to pretend? In the eyes of every ghost, there is another killing number. They will kill people in that order. If they don't kill people in the order of the game, those ghosts will be annihilated. During this period, we have to deduce and even find the ghosts hidden among us according to the number on the surface and the order of the people killed. Suwon, I can tell you that your actual number is 4 and I'm 5. Before you, 3 people will die, and before the third person dies, you are absolutely safe. We have to find those ghosts during this period. When they are bound by the rules and can't make a move against us, eliminate them. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Suwon's eyes were filled with tears as she said this. Chimu gently raised his hand, and an Arabic number 6 formed by black mist gradually appeared in his palm. "You are number 5. I am number 6. In this layer of the dreamland, the rules of the game is to kill people in order. We will know our number in advance, from 1 to 9. It seems very simple, but in fact, this is only the number on the surface. In the eyes of every ghost, there is another killing number." "I don't understand." Suwon looked at Chimu and imperceptibly took a step back. "Why do you know so much? Since you know the rules and know the real number, then, do you also know who the ghosts are?" "Who is the ghost?" "This, I really don't know. No, or rather, I should have known before." Speaking till here, Chimu's expression was somewhat helpless. "Xiaowan, I know that you still don't trust me right now, but you have to believe that I will never harm you. We don't have much time now, really not much." Chimu secretly glanced at the number in his other hand that was continuously counting down the time in the palm of his hand. He paid all the price in exchange for a chance to return to this layer of the dreamland. Although most of the memories related to this layer of the dreamland were blocked, he was confident that he could bring Suwon alive and enter the next layer of the dreamland within 3 days. Chapter 29. Suwon's mood was a bit chaotic. This night, her state of mind was confused. From that strange dream, to Zixin's appearance, to Chimu suddenly saying those strange things. Suwon's reason told her that she couldn't believe anyone at this time. But thinking of Zixin's solemn vow, thinking of Chimu's indescribable but firm expression, Suwon hesitated. Xiaowan. Seeing Suwon in a daze, Chimu couldn't help but lean forward, raising his hand as if he wanted to touch Suwon's body that was not far from him. Suwon returned to her senses and immediately dodged Chimu's hand in a panic. "Chimu, wait here. I'll go get clothes for you." As she spoke, she ran into her parents' bedroom like she was escaping. Once the door to the bedroom closed, Suwon felt her vision go black. Zixin's whole body pressed down on her. Suwon had no choice but to lean against the door. "Zixin?" she called out in a low voice, afraid that Chimu in the living room would hear. Zixin only laughed lowly. That smile hid a deep ridicule and disdain. "I really didn't expect that you would hook up with Chimu so quickly." Although he already thought it through after breaking up for half a year and let go, and because he had an ability, more people liked him. But hearing Chimu and Suwon's conversation with his own ears, Zixin still felt uncomfortable in his heart. How long has Suwon been together with him? How many days has she and Chimu known each other? Not long ago, he naively thought that Suwon still had a bit of reluctance to part with him. Now, it seems that it was nothing more than his own wishful thinking. Ah, he really is stupid. Didn't this woman leave him at that time because he was poor? And Chimu? Even if he's a silk pants who loves everyone he sees, but at least he's a rich and powerful second generation. Xin, what are you saying? Hearing Xin's words, Suwon's face also became very cold. Didn't you hear what I said? I don't want to repeat it a second time. Xin retreated a few steps. Hanze's gaze on Suwon was like looking at a particularly dirty thing. I should have thought of it earlier. A vain woman like you can give up anything for money. Vain? When Suwon heard Xin's words, she couldn't help but want to laugh. I just want to have a good life and make my family rich. Is this called vanity? Then what are you called? Is of inferiority, or is it? People live in this world for survival and money. What's wrong with liking money? I'm not stealing, robbing, or degrading myself. I just want to find a responsible partner who can make money and give me and my parents a good life. What's wrong with that? Xin, you've always been feeling inferior. You want to go back to the mountains because you shrink back at the sight of this bustling city. Of words. Of Xin's face of one. Oaf as if he heard the funniest joke in the world. Xin's gaze carried a bit of madness. Suwon, it's you who has eyes but can't see the golden inlaid jade. In the future, I will definitely stand at the top of this society, but what about you? Apart from wanting to find a rich person, what else do you have? Xin's self-confidence was the same as all of those male leads who suddenly became rich overnight, or those who opened to cheat. Xin's self-confidence was bursting at the seams. He only felt that he must have been blind to have taken a fancy to Suwon, this kind of woman without character. Right now, he completely forgot that kind of apprehension when he was pursuing Suwon and that kind of feeling of blaming the heavens and blaming others when he was lovelorn. After having ability, he felt that he can conquer the whole world, conquer all women. The current Suwon in his eyes is really disgusting to death. He, Xin, is heaven's favored child. He will shine brightly in this world, and Suwon, this kind of person, is not fit to stay by his side. Right now, only Meng Tingyao, that kind of girl, can be barely worthy of him. Suwon, originally when the crisis happened, the first person that I thought of was you, but you let me down too much. As he spoke, Xin didn't look at Suwon's face that was pale with anger. He quickly walked past her body and abruptly pushed open the bedroom door. So slow. Chimu, who was on the sofa, tilted his body and turned his head. Immediately, the expression on his face became sluggish for a moment. Yo, isn't this Xin? His many years of experience made Chimu return to his normal state in an instant. He didn't forget to look at Xin with a smile that wasn't a smile. In Xin's eyes, Chimu had always been that kind of fickle and dissolute second generation. Although his appearance was considered handsome, but other than that skin that could deceive people, what else did he have? Chimu's, money and status all came from his father's generation. Separated from his family, he was nothing. This kind of rich second generation was what Xin always looked down on the most. If it wasn't because Chimu was Chun Yufeng's childhood friend, Xin wouldn't even be bothered to say a word to this kind of person. Facing Chimu's smile, Xin looked at him with a deep and serene gaze. Then, he quickly turned around and walked towards the door. Xin, who felt that he had already seen through Chimu's nature, felt that once he left, Suwon's days tonight probably wouldn't be good. But she brought this upon herself. He wasn't prepared to explain anything for her. Chapter 30. Xin, how about we make a deal? Chimu's voice was lazy. Xin didn't need to turn his head to imagine first young Master Chi's aloof appearance right now. Not interested. Xin already unlocked the door and his hand was on the doorknob, as if he was about to open the door and leave. Don't you want to know what your real serial number is? Chimu's voice was heard again, carrying a lot of certainty. Xin's leaving figure paused for a bit. Why should I trust you? Although he really wanted to know the answer, Was Chimu really worthy of trust? How much he said was true and how much was false, other than himself, no one knew. You can also choose not to believe me. No one is forcing you. But Chimu, who was on the sofa, lightly turned his body. Being together with us is undoubtedly the safest. Whether you choose to form an alliance with us or choose to fight alone, everything is up to you. Of course, if you feel that you can't bear to see me and Xiaowan showing affection in front of you all day, then I also can't do anything about it. Who let me love her so much? I can't live without her. Go to hell. Su Wan, who had returned to the living room, happened to hear Chi Mu's last sentence. She forcefully threw the suit in her arms at Chi Mu's face and ruthlessly scolded him. Io, hitting is affection, scolding is love. I know you love me. Chi Mu pulled down the clothes on his face and gave Su Wan a roguish smile. Shameless. Su Wan glared at him and turned to see Zi Xian at the door. Her face became even colder. Why haven't you left yet? If it was said that not long ago, Su Wan was still considering whether or not to put down her pride and reconcile with Zi Xian, then the current Su Wan had already completely cut off that thought. She never thought that she would be such a shameless woman in Zi Xian's heart. It turns out that he never thought highly of her. A real man, if he truly liked a girl, even if they parted ways in the end, even if that girl abandoned herself, he would only feel a bit regretful. He wouldn't be like Zi Xian, childishly and conceited, and hurt people. After all, he had once truly loved her. Turning his head like this and degrading people to nothing. Was he really a man? Su Wan was truly bitterly disappointed. She was originally the daughter of a small family in the city. She never felt that she was very noble, but she had never been looked down upon like this. Hearing Su Wan's cold words and turning his head to see her looking at him with a wounded face, Zi Xian couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Was she acting in front of Chimu? He acted as if he was a heartless man who had hurt her. At this very moment, Zi Xuan suddenly did not want to leave. His gaze fell on Chimu's body. At this moment, our young Master Chi was changing clothes on the sofa as if there was no one else present. The shirt that was stained with blood had long been thrown on the floor by him. Chimu, it's not impossible to cooperate with you, but your chips aren't enough. Zi Xuan's tone and gaze were full of confidence. He had a life-saving ability, and his entire person became very confident. Zi Xian. Chimu fixed his eyes on Zi Xian. This Zi Xuan was indeed problematic. Chimu remembered that Chun Yufeng once described that Zi Xian to him. That was a child who looked very cheerful and lively, but in reality, his heart was very fragile and self-abased. The other brothers in the dormitory always took his feelings into consideration and never had any conflicts with him. This kind of Zi Xian suddenly became full of confidence and looked down on everyone. Who gave him this kind of confidence? Chimu looked at Zi Xian with interest. Just now, I forgot to tell Xiaowan that every living person who is killed by a ghost will directly become a ghost. In other words, our enemies are constantly increasing. And, hearing Chimu's words, Zi Xian's brows raised. In other words, it really increased the unpredictability. Although Zi Xian was very confident in his ability had a time limit in the number of times he could use it. He couldn't use it more than 10 times a day. 10 times looked like a lot, but in this kind of crisis-ridden world, it was really somewhat dangerous. Also, Zi Xian imperceptibly looked at Chimu and then looked at Su Wan at the side. These two people currently seemed to be more trustworthy. At least before Chimu appeared, Zi Xian already gave Su Wan several opportunities to come into close contact with him. When he seemed to be defenseless, Su Wan didn't make any small movements. Therefore, she was at least a living person right now. As for Chimu, there were some mysteries on his body. He should be hiding some unknown secrets. Being together with him was better than being separated from him and then being schemed against behind his back. After pondering for a moment, Zi Xian nodded at Chimu. I'll do this deal. I don't know if you still have any additional conditions? Since it was a deal, Zi Xian believed that Chimu must have some request from him. Otherwise, he wouldn't stop him and wouldn't take the initiative to form an alliance with him. I have a condition. Chimu put away his playful expression and suddenly looked at Zi Xian with a serious and solemn face. What I want you to do is very simple. If we encounter danger together, I hope that you can help me protect Su-won to the best of your ability. Of course, I also don't expect you to always protect her. This time, I need you to protect her when I can't get away. That's enough. Easy Shin. Remember, this is a promise between men. You cannot agree to it. This way, our deal will be cancelled. Of course, if you agree to it, you must do it. Don't think of deceiving me. When Chimu's voice fell, Easy Shin and Su-won looked at him with extreme astonishment, as if it was the first time they met Chimu. Xiao-won, are you touched by me? Do you want to devote your life to me, Chimu, who was at the side, caught a glimpse of Su-won's gaze and immediately climbed up. He never forgot to increase his infatuation index in front of Su-won. And Su-won, who just had a trace of palpitation in her heart, saw Chimu's expression that seemed like a smile, yet not a smile, and immediately angrily turned her face away. Chapter 31. The night was long and dangerous. The three people who temporarily formed an alliance gathered in the living room of Su-won's house, not feeling sleepy at all. Time was still passing by minute, and it was going to be 3 in the morning soon. It's coming. Chimu already wore a white shirt and a black suit. Although he was dressed like an elite, the expression on his face was still sloppy. But after saying this sentence, he suddenly wrinkled his brows. The clock stopped at 3 in the morning, and Chimu's cell phone rang at this time. Looking at the familiar name on the screen, Chimu's gaze slowly became gloomy. It's Chun Yufeng? Easy Shin had been paying attention to Chimu's movements. Seeing his expression change, he couldn't help but take the initiative to ask.
N.
Chimu softly gave an N sound. Then, he looked deeply at Easy Shin and Su-won, who had been curled up in the other corner of the sofa. This dreamland space has very strict rules. For example, we will awaken our memories after midnight, and those dead ghosts will definitely have a set time to start killing people. For example, 3 in the morning. Late at night, Su-won glanced at the clock on the wall that stopped at 3, and a bone-chilling feeling slowly rose from the bottom of her heart. At 3 o'clock, Chun Yufeng immediately called Chimu. What does it represent? Thinking of this, Su-won immediately looked at Chimu nervously. Chimu once again lazily leaned on the sofa and picked up the phone as if nothing happened. Feng, is something the matter? Chimu, where are you? I had a nightmare. I want to talk to you. On the phone, Chun Yufeng kept gasping for breath. It was very clear that he still hadn't recovered from the dream. I'm outside right now. You go to my villa in the western suburbs and wait for me. I'll go back immediately. Saying this, not waiting for Chun Yufeng to respond, Chimu already hung up the phone. Playing with the phone, Chimu flicked his suit and slowly stood up. Let's go. We'll go meet him. You can do it? Seeing Chimu's calm appearance, Easy Shin couldn't help but ask, why can't I do it? Speaking till here, Chimu's gaze deepened as he turned to look at Su-won. If Fong Tian isn't a person, Xiao-won, remember not to be soft-hearted. Fong Tian, Su-won's heart moved. She thought of her best friend. That girl was so timid. She would be fine, right? But why hasn't that coward contacted me since 12:30 a.m.? Su-won was somewhat flustered. According to Fong Tian's personality, if she knew that she was in such a strange and dangerous dreamland, shouldn't she seek help from others at the first moment? Could it be that she was already? Su-won didn't dare to think further. She could only muddle-headedly go downstairs under the protection of Easy Shin and Chimu. Chimu's car was still parked downstairs, but one side of the car door was completely dented. Seeing the broken car door, Chimu helplessly shrugged his shoulders. I was too anxious when I came and there was an accident, but you can rest assured that my driving skills are absolutely very powerful. It was so awesome that everyone got into a car accident. Su-won didn't say anything. Actually, she also knew that the car accident wasn't Chimu's fault. Wasn't it because they were too unlucky? Not only did he encounter a car accident, but he was also pulled into this world of dreams. The three people finally got into the car. Chimu drove the car, thinking about his villa in the western suburbs. At this time, in a high-class residential area in the city center, Fong Tian was wrapped in a black trench coat and blindly followed behind a person. The two people took advantage of the darkness of the night, to quickly walk out of the entrance of the residential area. That figure suddenly stopped. Fang Tian, who was behind him, didn't expect it and directly bumped into that person. His body was very cold. Qin Lu. Fang Tian's face reddened. Are you okay? I'm fine. Qin Lu's voice was very low, and the cold air on his body was even more intense. Your body is very cold. How about I return the trench coat to you? Fang Tian nervously and shyly wanted to pull the trench coat off her body, but was stopped by Qin Lu, who was beside her. I'm not cold. Your body isn't good, so wear it first. Let's take a taxi and go find Su Wan. In. As soon as he mentioned Su Wan, Fang Tian's eyes brightened again. Actually, when she woke up from the nightmare, she thought of contacting Su Wan. But as luck would have it, when she dialed the number, she directly connected to Qin Lu's cell phone. Perhaps, only in this kind of crisis can one truly see through one's heart. In the wee hours of the morning, the streets were especially empty. Just when Fang Tian thought that they wouldn't be able to get a taxi, a pure black taxi stopped in front of the two people. What a strange taxi. Chapter 32. The western suburbs of Sea City were surrounded by mountains and rivers. On the scenic mountainside, there was a large villa complex. Chimu's villa was in this group of villas. This was a birthday gift that his father gave him during his 18th birthday party. That year, his coming-of-age party was held in this villa. Since then, this place became the place where he and his group of friends gathered and played. At this time, Chimu slowly drove the car into the spacious road. On both sides of the road were independent villas. From afar, he saw Chen Yufeng's car. The red Ferrari was parked on the roadside. Chen Yufeng, who was dressed in black, was leaning against the car. In front of him, there was a little red light that flickered. Chimu knew that he was smoking. Chen Yufeng had not abstained from smoking and drinking since he was young, but because he was still in school, his smoking addiction was not big. Only when he was particularly irritated or panicked would he keep smoking. Creak! Chimu sped up and the car suddenly stopped in front of Chen Yufeng. Chen Yufeng, who was in a daze, heard the sound of brakes and immediately raised his head nervously. He saw Chimu slowly walking down from the car. Fuck, Feng. You're not sleeping in the middle of the night. What do you want to do by calling me out? As usual, Chimu put one hand on the car door and the other hand unbuttoned his suit. His face was in a bad mood. Chen Yufeng did not speak. The smoke made people unable to see his expression clearly. Why is she in your car? Chen Yufeng saw Su Wan sitting in the front passenger seat. As for Ez Xin, who was lying in the back seat, he naturally could not see him. My girl, not in my car in the middle of the night. Could it be that she's in your car? Chimu raised his hand and knocked on the car window. Xiao Wan, get down. Su Wan hesitated and unwillingly got off the car. Chen Yufeng stared at Su Wan and then looked at Chimu with a deep meaning. Mu, you're good, ah? You got her so quickly. As soon as she heard Chen Yufeng's words, Su Wan's face became even darker. Chimu had a complacent smile on his face. He strode in front of Chen Yufeng and used his body to block Chen Yufeng and Su Wan's line of sight. Feng, are you envious? Do you want this older brother to teach you a few more moves? Haven't you always been pestering that Meng Tingyao? Hearing Meng Tingyao's name, Chen Yufeng just froze for a moment. He took the cigarette and took a deep breath. Then he looked at Chimu with a serious face and said, Chimu, you also had that dream, right? I know who the ghost is. Let's kill her together, okay? At the end of his speech, Chen Yufeng's hand that was holding the cigarette was trembling. Who? Chimu raised his hand and threw away the cigarette between Chen Yufeng's fingers. Then he put one hand on Chen Yufeng's shoulder and stared at his face. Do you know who it is? Yes, Chen Yufeng seemed to have made a great decision. A ruthless color flashed in his eyes. It's Bai Xiaoyu. Bai Xiaoyu? Su Wan? Su Wan? Fang Tian knocked on the door of Su Wan's house for a long time and shouted for a long time. In the end, there was no sound in the room. In the end, Fang Tian's voice was somewhat choked with sobs. Qin Lu, what should we do? I can't get through to Su Wan's phone either. Do you think something has happened to her? Something has happened? It shouldn't be that fast. Qin Lu seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly lifted his foot and kicked open the door of Su Wan's house. This Fong Tian was stupefied. Qin Lu walked to the living room as if there was no one else present. He saw the set of clothes with blood scattered in the living room. Qin Lu's eyes flashed. Ah, there's blood. Fong Tian, who came in later, saw the clothes on the floor and couldn't help but shout, "Oh no! Oh no! Su Wan must have met with danger." Qin Lu, quickly think of a way to save her. She should still be alive for the time being. Qin Lu crouched down and carefully looked at the expensive suit and shirt. Among the 9 of them, only Chen Yufeng and Chimu could afford to wear this set of clothes. Could it be? Chimu came? For a moment, Qin Lu's gaze flickered. He hesitantly took out his phone, hesitating whether or not he should give Chimu a call to confirm. And at this time, Chen Yufeng's eyes widened as he looked at Chimu, who was in front of him in disbelief. Chimu's hand was holding a sharp dagger. At this moment, the dagger had accurately pierced Chen Yufeng's body. Chimu, you. Chen Yufeng's hand that was stained with blood stiffly wanted to grab Chimu's hand, but at this time, Chimu pushed the dagger in his hand away. I know you're a ghost. Chimu leaned on Chen Yufeng's ear and said in a low voice, if I didn't guess incorrectly, Bai Xiaoyu is serial number 1, right? Serial number 1. According to the rules of this world, all ghosts' first target was Bai Xiaoyu. After Bai Xiaoyu died, they could go and kill the second serial number 1 target. I. In the end, Chen Yufeng looked at Chimu as if he wanted to say something. He seemed to have obtained relief. He opened his mouth and finally closed his eyes. The blood that clearly flowed all over the ground actually slowly decreased until it disappeared. Chen Yufeng died. No, perhaps it should be said that Chen Yufeng disappeared. It had disappeared completely. If it wasn't for that eye-catching Ferrari still parked at the side, Su Wan would even doubt whether Chen Yufeng had really appeared before. You killed him? Seeing Chimu turn around and calmly walk towards her, Su Wan subconsciously retreated half a step. You're scared? Chimu looked at Su Wan and raised his eyebrows. He wanted me to help him kill Bai Xiaoyu. I think Bai Xiaoyu should be serial number 1. Su Wan, you have to be clear. If I was serial number 1, I'm afraid Chen Yufeng would not hesitate to make a move against me. While speaking, Chimu had already walked in front of Su Wan. Su Wan, in the face of life and death, everyone will choose to protect themselves. This is human nature. It has nothing to do with morality. If we can't even protect ourselves, then we might as well not be human anymore. Human nature. Su Wan gently turned around. That's right, if it was her, between her own life and someone else's life, she would not hesitate to choose to protect herself, right? After all, everyone wants to live. Returning to the car, Xin was sitting in the back seat to rest. He actually didn't expect Chimu to be so straightforward. On the way here, Chimu had him hide. Xin thought that Chimu needed his help. Now it seems that he was only lowering Chen Yufeng's vigilance. Su Wan and Chimu were alone together in the middle of the night. It wasn't strange for a man and a woman to be alone. But if he was also in Chimu's car and was seen by Chen Yufeng, he would definitely be suspicious. He didn't expect this dandy young master to be so meticulous. Xian's evaluation of Chimu unconsciously changed. His vigilance towards him also became higher and higher. Where are we going now? Are we going to find Bai Xiaoyu? Seeing Chimu start the car, Xian couldn't help but ask. Bai Xiaoyu. Chimu nodded. I hope she's still alive. Serial number 1. Su Wan subconsciously tightened her seatbelt. Chen Yufeng could think of finding someone to kill Bai Xiaoyu. Then what about the other ghosts? Did they already make a move? Just like how Chimu was worried, Su Wan was also very worried about Bai Xiaoyu's situation. At this time, Bai Xiaoyu was indeed like what everyone was worried about. Her situation was worrisome. In the narrow alley, Bai Xiaoyu covered her injured arm and ran all the way, leaving a long and thin trail of blood behind her. Chapter 33. When she woke up from the dream, the whole world changed, empty streets, a strange long night. Meng Tingyao clenched the knife hidden in her sleeves and quietly walked alone on the quiet street. She didn't know where to go. The servants in the house seemed to have disappeared overnight. The whole house was frighteningly quiet. When the clock stopped at 3 o'clock, Meng Tingyao's heart was even more flustered. She left the house alone. Before she left, she picked a knife that wasn't too big but looked very sharp in the kitchen and hid it in her sleeves. What should she do? Who should she believe? Meng Tingyao remembered that she always carried her phone with her. At this time, she actually didn't know who to contact. Perhaps it was because of her noble birth. Meng Tingyao had always been a goddess in everyone's mind, elegant and inviolable. Everyone saw her cold and aloof side. No one was willing to be friends with her, and those boys were all infatuated with her. Meng Tingyao had long been tired of this kind of life. In fact, it wasn't that she didn't try to make friends with others, but the difference in family background and environment made her seem out of place with everyone on the weekend. The girls in the same dormitory liked to go shopping on the pedestrian street. But Meng Tingyao never wore clothes from other places except for the largest luxury jewelry store in Sea City. During the classmate dinner, everyone chose the popular buffet restaurant and then the KTV room with a reasonable price. In Meng Tingyao's eyes, these were particularly tacky and crowded. They were all particularly unhygienic and unsafe places. She couldn't adapt to this kind of environment, which made her seem out of place. Because she couldn't adapt, everyone felt that she was aloof and disdained to be associated with others. Later, Meng Tingyao wanted to make up for her relationship with others. She also learned to treat others to a Western restaurant for a meal. But later, others said that she looked down on others and deliberately bullied them. Meng Tingyao had always been unable to understand these. She was used to clothes with taste and style. She looked at those clothes from small brands and simply looked down on them. What was wrong with her? She never looked down on people who wore clothes from small brands. She didn't even mind that her friends only wore clothes from street stalls that cost less than 100 yuan. However, she didn't mind, but others always minded. Meng Tingyao knew that there was a phrase in this world called, hate the rich. In some people's eyes, whatever the rich do is wrong. Whatever they buy is just putting on airs. Perhaps, no one was willing to help her now. No one would believe in themselves. As Meng Tingyao thought like this, bitterness unconsciously spread from the bottom of her heart. Help! Help! Right at this time, Meng Tingyao suddenly heard intermittent cries for help coming from the alley not far away. Who was it? Meng Tingyao hesitated, but in the end, she couldn't help but be curious and quietly walked over. The alley was very dark. Meng Tingyao could only vaguely see the silhouette of two people. It seemed to be a man chasing a woman. What was worth noting was that the man was holding a knife in his hand. The body of the knife was still reflecting white light. He's left-handed. Meng Tingyao took a deep look at the man's left hand that was holding the knife. Gradually, that woman already ran close to her. She still didn't give up and continued to call for help. Help! Someone come quickly. Someone save me. It was already so dangerous, but the woman's voice did not tremble at all, and this slightly androgynous voice was so familiar. This is Meng Tingyao's body suddenly froze. She could tell that it was Bai Xiaoyu's voice. Bai Xiaoyu. Almost in an instant, Meng Tingyao shouted and rushed out. Although after several efforts, Meng Tingyao didn't become true friends with Bai Xiaoyu and the others, but after staying in the same dormitory for so long, everyone still had some feelings. Meng Tingyao couldn't remain indifferent at this time. Moreover, she knew even more clearly that if she didn't save Bai Xiaoyu, then the next one to die might be herself. The figure that was chasing each other froze for a moment the moment Meng Tingyao appeared. Meng Tingyao, quickly save me. Bai Xiaoyu seemed to have grabbed onto the last straw. After a brief daze, she suddenly rushed towards Meng Tingyao's direction, and the man who had been chasing behind her hesitated at this moment. After that, he actually changed his direction and quickly escaped. Bai Xiaoyu's expression changed. Bai Xiaoyu. Right now, Meng Tingyao's palms were all sweaty. Seeing that that person actually left by himself, she breathed a sigh of relief. After that, she immediately greeted Bai Xiaoyu. You're injured? Meng Tingyao's palms touched the wet and slippery bloodstain. Her movements stiffened for a moment. Fortunately, I won't die. Fortunately, this Mrs. Foundation is good. Although Bai Xiaoyu, who grew up in the society, was strictly prohibited by Boss Bai from contacting the brothers in the society, she still secretly learned some martial arts. Bai Xiaoyu, who was finally out of danger, leaned to the side. She dealt with the wounds on her body with ease and familiarity while raising her eyes to look at Meng Tingyao. It's really all thanks to you. Meng Tingyao, why are you here? Meng Tingyao took a deep breath and raised her eyes to look at the direction that person just escaped. By Xiaoyu, you should also know what kind of situation we're in right now. Just now, that person who wanted to kill you, who was it? He. Is he a ghost? Ghost? Here, there was no difference between ghosts and people. Chapter 34. Boss Bai's territory was in the northern part of Sea City. This was an old part of the city and public security had always been bad. Chimu's car drove to a park in the northern part of the city. Suan wanted to give Bai Xiaoyu a call. After rummaging through her clothes for a long time, Suan discovered that she didn't know where she lost her phone. I'll do it. Easy Xian, who was sitting in the back seat, took out his cell phone. Because of his poverty, his cell phone was still an old model made in China, and it was a second-hand one that had been used by a relative. Easy Xian found Bai Xiaoyu's number in the phone book and immediately called her. The call connected, but no one answered. Do. Easy Xian frowned. Just when he thought that the call would be automatically hung up, the call was suddenly connected. Easy Xian. A crisp and pleasant female voice came from the phone, and there was a hint of doubt in her tone. This was not Bai Xiaoyu's voice. Easy Xian didn't speak, but the other side of the phone paused for a moment before speaking again. I'm Meng Tingyao. I'm with Bai Xiaoyu right now. Meng Tingyao? Easy Xuan immediately remembered Meng Tingyao's aloof and delicate face. Meng Tingyao was publicly recognized as the campus belle goddess. She was the dream lover and YY object of countless male students. Just like other boys, although Easy Xian never pursued Meng Tingyao, this didn't hinder him from admiring the beauty of the goddess in his heart. So when he heard Meng Tingyao's voice at this moment, Easy Xian's expression subconsciously eased up a lot. You're together with Bai Xiaoyu right now? Did you encounter any danger? Danger? Meng Tingyao on the phone seemed a bit surprised. What danger? Bai Xiaoyu is the ghost's first target. She is in danger now, and you will be in danger if you are with her. Where are you now? We'll go and find you. Easy Xian's tone was a bit anxious, and Su Wan, who was in front of the car, slightly frowned when she heard his words. You guys? Compared to Easy Xian's anxiety, Meng Tingyao appeared very calm. Actually, she had been testing Easy Xian's attitude all along. Now, she actually let down her guard against him. But the word we made her hesitate again. Who was Easy Xian with? Was the person with him trustworthy? Who are you with? Meng Tingyao wanted to first confirm the identity of the person with Easy Xian. It is Su Wan and Chimu. Su Wan? Chimu? Meng Tingyao paused for a moment and immediately whispered, Bai Xiaoyu is injured. We're in a very safe place right now. You can come and find us, but you can only be alone. Meng Tingyao felt that Easy Xian could be trusted, but she didn't trust him 100%. As for Chimu, she didn't trust him even more. Therefore, she only asked Easy Xian to meet them alone. This could greatly guarantee the safety of both parties. If Easy Xian was also untrustworthy, at least he was only one person right now. She and Bai Xiaoyu could deal with him. If Su Wan or Chimu was added, then it would be more troublesome. Hearing Meng Tingyao's proposal, Easy Xian only thought for a moment and immediately agreed to her request. After that, Easy Xian hung up the phone, and the car was silent for a moment. Have you thought it through? Chimu shot a glance at Easy Xian. Easy Xian nodded his head. It's not that there are no benefits for us to act separately right now. Actually, Easy Xian's thinking was very simple. Since Bai Xiaoyu was number one, then as long as he was always by Bai Xiaoyu's side. Once someone came to kill her, he would activate his ability. That way, he could catch all the remaining ghosts in one fell swoop. This was the fastest and most effective method. Another point was that regarding this world's rules, Easy Xian felt that it wasn't as simple as what Chimu said. Since ghosts could obtain the right to live by killing people, then wouldn't people who killed ghosts also get the corresponding reward? Otherwise, why would Chimu kill Qin Yufeng without hesitation? Easy Xian had long been suspicious of Chimu, and now that he knew Bai Xiaoyu's whereabouts, he had the opportunity to use practical actions to prove his guess. It can be said that in this kind of environment, The trust between people had reached the most fragile critical point. Easy Xian wanted to maximize the benefits and make himself as safe as possible. This was also human nature. Since it's like this, you get off. We'll meet again someday. Chimu unlocked the car door and Easy Xian got off the car without hesitation and left. Suwon saw Easy Xian get off the car from the rearview mirror and walk towards the alley while dialing a phone. What? You can't bear to part with it? Chimu noticed Suwon's gaze and couldn't help but ask. Suwon shook her head and retracted her gaze. There's nothing to be reluctant to part with it. I just feel that I've never truly understood Easy Xian. As she spoke, Suwon leaned her entire upper body on the back of the chair and lightly exhaled. Chimu, what should we do next? Are you hungry? Chimu didn't answer Suwon's words. Instead, he asked without any reason. Hungry? That kind of trembling feeling of fear already made Suwon not feel hungry. At this time, when she heard Chimu's question, she suddenly felt a bit hungry. Let's go eat. I know a restaurant that makes very delicious side dishes.
But
Suwon wanted to say something, but Chimu was already speeding on the road. There were no traffic jams or red lights along the way. Suwon suddenly felt a bit sleepy. She drowsily leaned on the seat and fell asleep. Seeing that she fell asleep, Chimu subconsciously slowed down the car. He tilted his head and his gaze slid over Suwon's face again and again. Sleep well. You'll get better. Chimu whispered a sentence and turned the car into a one-way street, according to his memory. On the empty street, Fan Shujun silently walked by himself. His shadow was stretched very, very long under the street lights. He didn't remember how far he walked when the phone's ringtone pulled him back to reality. Fan Shujun took out his phone. His phone screen was still stuck with dried blood stains. That was by Xiao Yu's blood. In the dim light, the white light of the phone screen was particularly dazzling. Looking at the three words Easy Xian, Fan Shujun sneered and pressed the hang-up button. Immediately after, he continued to stroll on the street, like a wandering spirit in the middle of the night, until the phone rang once again. This time, the number displayed on the screen was Qin Lu. Truly troublesome. Fan Shujun suddenly raised his hand and threw the phone in his hand into the bushes. Then, he somewhat impatiently took off his glasses. That pair of misty big eyes, at this moment, became a lot clearer. Where should I go next? Who will I meet next? Right now, Fan Shujun seemed to be standing at a crossroads in confusion. His entire person's complexion was particularly bad. At this time, a car suddenly slowly drove over from the corner of the street. Fan Shujun froze for a moment and immediately hid behind a flower bed on the roadside. That car drove very slowly, so Fan Shujun could clearly see Suwon, who was sitting on the front passenger seat, sleeping peacefully, and Chimu, who was beside her, concentrating on driving. How could Suwon and Chimu be together? Fan Shujun was a bit puzzled, but in the next second, his whole body stiffened. A blood-stained hand suddenly rested on Fan Shujun's shoulder, and the smell of blood assaulted his nostrils. Don't be nervous, it's me. A somewhat fleeting voice came from behind. Fan Shujun's taut nerves immediately relaxed. Why are you here? Who injured you? Chapter 35. When Chimu carefully carried Suwon out of the car, Suwon woke up. Don't move. Seeing that she was going to struggle, Chimu subconsciously hugged the person in his arms. You just woke up. Be careful not to catch a cold. I'll hold you. The elegantly decorated restaurant was empty. The lights in the hall were lit, but there wasn't a single guest and there wasn't a trace of any service staff. Chimu carried Suwon to a private room and gently placed her on the innermost seat. I used to come here often. I'll go to the kitchen to see if there's anything to eat. You rest here for a bit. Seeing Chimu's departing back, Suwon stared blankly for a while. When Chimu came back with a few dishes, Suwon was still in a daze. Eat. Chimu put the food on the dining table in front of Suwon. 2 fragrant stir-fried dishes were still steaming. Suwon smelled the aroma of the food and came back to her senses. She saw Chimu standing at the side. The cuffs of his shirt were casually rolled up and there was a faint smell of smoke from the kitchen on his body. You made it? Suwon looked at Chimu with some surprise and disbelief. Chimu smiled. revealing 8 white teeth. It's been a long time since I personally cooked. Have a taste and see if it's delicious. I was afraid that you'd be too hungry, so I simply fried 2 dishes that are easy to cook. As he spoke, Chimu attentively helped Suwon scoop the rice and took the chopsticks. Suwon hesitated and took a bite. The taste was surprisingly delicious. I really didn't expect that you would actually cook. Suwon put down the chopsticks and looked at Chimu with flickering eyes. Coming out of the living room and working in the kitchen. This is the model of a good man. A man who can't cook is not a good husband. Chimu said while attentively adding food to Suwon. You eat more. Only when you're full will we have the strength to deal with them. Suwon smiled and softly said to herself, I found out that this person, is actually really not bad. What did you say? The smile on the corner of Suwon's mouth had yet to disperse when Chimu was caught off guard and moved closer. His cheek was almost sticking to her face. The two people's breaths intertwined and Suwon's face turned red. Why are you leaning so close? She panicked and wanted to turn around. As a result, because she was sitting on a chair, her center of gravity was unstable and she fell along with the chair. Xiaowon. Chimu's hands were swift and almost instantly pulled Suwon. Then, Chimu hugged Suwon and fell to the ground. Fortunately, he had been protecting Suwon in his arms, so Suwon was not injured. Chimu, when he fell down, because Chimu hit the corner of the chair, the wound on his arm split open and bled a lot. Her fingers touched those bright red and warm blood stains, and Suwon immediately became anxious. She turned over and sat on the side and anxiously called Chimu's name. Chimu, what happened to you? Wake up. Wake up. Unknowingly, Suwon's eyes reddened and drops of hot tears fell on Chimu's face. Chimu, who had kept his eyes closed without any reaction, finally slowly opened his eyes. Xiaowon, do you love me? Chimu looked at Suwon's reddened eyes. On one hand, he strenuously lifted his hand to wipe away the tears on her face. On the other hand, he eagerly looked at her, hoping to get an affirmative answer from her. Love? Even if it was just a little. Suwon's expression was somewhat at a loss. She stared blankly for a moment and then dared to look straight into Chimu's eyes. Chimu, then do you love me? Why are you so good to me? She didn't remember having any close contact with him. The two of them only met twice. The trip before the accident was also their first meaningful chat. Suwon couldn't figure out the reason why Chimu did this. Love at first sight? That was absolutely impossible. Meng Tingyao, that kind of girl, was the object of men's love at first sight. Although Suwon was confident in her looks, she wasn't narcissistic enough to think that Chimu would fall in love with her at first sight. Then, in the end, why? Actually, this wasn't the first dream we experienced. Of course, it wasn't the last one either. Chimu's gaze was somewhat complicated. He still looked at Suwon and the tenderness in his eyes was not fake. Actually, you and I, we have experienced several different dreams. Xiaowon, you saved my life. We once went through life and death together, but in the end, in order to save me, you died. As if recalling the most painful experience, Chimu's face slightly distorted. In every dream, the person who survives in the end will obtain different abilities and different rewards. I used all my rewards to exchange for this opportunity to return to the past. The time is only 72 hours. Speaking up to here, Chimu raised his hand, his palm facing upwards. Suwon clearly saw that there was an imprint similar to a dial on his palm, constantly counting down. The time in their space-time stopped at 3:00 in the morning, but the time in Chimu's palm was not limited by this space and still kept rotating. Suwon was already stunned in place. She was unable to accept such a complicated and strange truth for a while. Chimu. Suwon lowered her eyes and looked at Chimu with a complicated gaze. After hesitating for a long time, she finally extended her hand towards Chimu. Chimu smiled and raised his hand to hold Suwon's slender little hand. He let Suwon use her strength to help him stand up. Right at this time, the door of the private room was suddenly knocked open by someone. A figure stumbled and rushed in, followed by a strong smell of blood. Fan Shujun. Suwon looked at Fan Shujun, who suddenly appeared at the door in horror. His whole body was covered in blood, and his eyes were red. Practically without any pause, he brandished the long knife in his hand and stabbed towards Chimu. Chimu, be careful. At the same time, Su Wan was frightened. Her body subconsciously blocked in front of Chimu. Almost at the moment of life and death, Fan Shujun's movements suddenly paused. Chimu took the opportunity to lift his leg and sweep away Fan Shujun's weapon. And at the same time, Chimu turned around and tightly held Su Wan in his arms. This was the first time the two people were so close, so intimate. Xiao Wan, no. Chimu's body suddenly froze. He looked at Su Wan in his arms in disbelief. Su Wan's face was still leaning against Chimu's chest, as if she was listening to his heartbeat. There's no heartbeat. The soft female voice carried a trace of careless laughter. Su Wan raised her face and met Chimu's gradually slackening eyes. I won. She raised her most elegant smile and announced her final victory. At this time, the two people were still tightly hugging each other, but the miniature Mitsubishi bayonet in Su Wan's hand had already mercilessly pierced Chimu's heart, absorbing his heart blood little by little. How could this be? Chimu moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but Su Wan made a shushing gesture at him. Goodbye, Mr. Nightmare. No, maybe I should call you. Su Wan tiptoed and slowly approached Chimu's ear, saying word by word, Dreamer, Chi-Yu. Chimu's consciousness gradually blurred. Although he was very unwilling, he still slowly closed his eyes. His whole body instantly turned into starlight and disappeared. Lost time-space, Plane Restorer Headquarters, Executor Connection Warehouse Number 3, Chi-Yu slowly opened his eyes. There was no careless smile on his face as usual. At this moment, his face was strangely unsightly. The first time he confronted Number 3 over there, he was actually defeated. Moreover, it was in the dream space that he was the best at. This was not scientific. You lost, right? At this time, a familiar voice suddenly rang in Chi-Yu's ears. Chi-Yu looked up and saw his old rival, Yun Shang, smiling as he leaned against the door of the execution room. It was very clear that this fellow specially rushed over to mock him. People make mistakes and horses stumble. What does this count as? Chi-Yu pretended to raise his eyebrows in disdain. Yun Shang, who was at the door, smiled. Suji has already warned you many times. Don't provoke Number 3 over there. You just didn't listen. Now do you know how powerful she is? Powerful? Chi-Yu's face stiffened. That woman. Until now, Chi-Yu still didn't understand. It was clearly in his own dream space. Everything was under his control and surveillance. How did that woman disguise herself and didn't reveal the slightest flaw? This was not realistic. Among all the mission enforcers that Chi-Yu knew, other than their number 1 Su, no one could disguise themselves so flawlessly in front of him, the dreamer. Don't tell me that woman also has that thing like Suji? No, absolutely impossible. Chi-Yu denied his own guess, but his heart became more and more confused. Seeing him racking his brains, Yun Shang on the side seemed to be somewhat unable to bear it. He sighed and faintly said, I have been at Suji's side for the longest time, so there are some things that I know that others don't. Regarding Number 3 over there, in fact, she and Suji used to be. Yun Shang's words hadn't finished when he was suddenly interrupted by a commotion. It's rising again. Rising again. The point list has changed again. That newcomer actually directly rushed into the top 10. Is he really a madman? Your mother. I have never seen such a crazy newcomer. How can we old people endure? The commotion became more and more ear-piercing. At this time, Chi-Yu had already walked to the door and curiously looked at the point list floating in the air not far away. What happened? Seeing his blank expression, Yun Shang forgot the topic just now and turned to Chi-Yu with a gloating smile. Oh, that's right. I almost forgot to tell you. During the time you were doing missions, Suji received an incredible newcomer from a collapsed plane. That guy's perception is off the charts. His martial strength is off the charts, and even his IQ completely surpasses mortals. TSK, this newcomer is especially vigorous. Usually, he doesn't put Suji in his eyes, doing missions like crazy. Now, he has already become our department's upstart. Perhaps one day he will replace your position. So crazy. Chi-Yu couldn't help but be speechless. A newcomer directly rushed into the top 10? How many missions did he do in the end? Is this still a person? Chiyu didn't dare to imagine what kind of existence this person was. This kind of speed would break Su Ji's record for many years, right? For a moment, Chiyu also forgot the worry of being defeated. On the contrary, he looked at Yunsheng in high spirits. Is that newcomer still doing missions? I really want to meet him. What's his name? Su Rue. Yunsheng coldly spat out a name. To be honest, regarding Su Rue's character, Yunsheng really didn't like it. Su Rue? Chapter 36. In the luxuriously decorated private room, Su Wan and Fan Shujun looked at each other in dismay. In the end, it was Su Wan who took the lead to break the silence between the two people. Do you want me to help you deal with your wounds? Her gaze fell on Fan Shujun's wounds. His injuries were quite serious. It's nothing. Fan Shujun gasped for breath and sat on a chair at the side. I killed Qin Yufeng. Now I have the ability to recover from wounds in a short period of time. When Fan Shujun was stopped by Chen Yufeng on the road, he noticed that Chen Yufeng's breathing was unstable. He and Bai Xiaoyu were both injured. With his keen observation, Fan Shujun saw through Chen Yufeng's identity. When the two people were entangled, he killed Chen Yufeng. And before Chen Yufeng turned into ashes, he told Fan Shujun that he was killed by Qimu. Qimu was a ghost. At that time, Fan Shujun suddenly remembered that he saw Qimu and Su Wan together not too long ago. He didn't have time to think too much and immediately followed the direction in his memory. As a result, he saw Qimu's car at the entrance of this shop. Everything happened very quickly. From Fan Shujun rushing into Su Wan killing Qimu, Fan Shujun still couldn't sort out all of this until now. Seeing Fan Shujun's contemplative appearance, Su Wan didn't speak. She walked in front of Fan Shujun and lightly raised her hand to snap her fingers. The wounds on Fan Shujun's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even the bloodstains on his body disappeared without a trace. Fan Shujun came back to his senses and looked at Su Wan with a surprised and vigilant face. How did you do it? Su Wan didn't care and smiled. It's just like what you saw. I killed Qimu, and what I obtained was control over the entire nightmare world. What? Fan Shujun suddenly stood up, his voice trembling with excitement. You said that Qimu, he is? That's right. He's the nightmare. He trapped the 8 of us in this strange world. Su Wan's voice was powerful and resonant. The 9th nightmare, 9 layers of dreamland, 9 people's deathbed struggle. Everything seemed reasonable, but in fact, after Su Wan entered this world, she felt very out of place. First of all, when she entered the mission world automatically changed the plot. Of course, this kind of thing was not unheard of. Generally, there were several reasons for the plot to be changed. The biggest possibility was that there were outsiders who had entered. So, why did this outsider want to change the plot? In this world of dreams, what ability did he have to change the established plot? The only answer Su Wan could think of was that this person could control this nightmare world. If there was someone in this world who could control dreams, then who would that person be? Why did he forcefully change the original plot because of her arrival? One by one, these questions perplexed Su Wan, until Su Wan came into contact with Qimu in the first layer of Dreamland. She discovered that Qimu's nature was different. The Qimu she saw was completely different from the Qimu in the original plot. After suspecting that Qimu was an outsider, Su Wan recalled the phone call she received from Fan Shujun in her dream. At first, Su Wan thought that it was also controlled by the nightmare, but later, Su Wan had a new guess. Why did Fan Shujun call her? If it wasn't controlled by the nightmare, who had the ability to penetrate that layer of Dreamland and let that phone call connect? Could it be that phone call was made by her future self? Then what was the information he wanted to tell her? Ninth, Meng. This was indeed the clue that Su Wan left for herself. Ninth, it indicated the 9th person. And Meng, in fact, Fan Shujun said dream. The actual meaning of this clue was the 9th person was the nightmare. So, this world was called the 9th nightmare and not the 9-layer nightmare. In fact, from the beginning, there were always 8 people riding in the car. There was never a 9th person. The 8 people who had a car accident were invaded by the nightmare at that specific place and time. He controlled everyone's thoughts and memories and became the 9th person. At that time, Suwon completely figured it out. In fact, Chun Yufeng was very good at racing. His driving skills were first-rate, and he didn't need to find someone to drive. Moreover, they had 2 dormitories. One was 503, and the other was 305. This was actually the initial number hint. The hint was that there were always only 8 people. Chimu was the extra one. Or it should be said that the nightmare transformed into Chimu's appearance according to everyone's memories, tampered with everyone's memories, and started a game of the 9-layer dream. This way, everything in the original plot could be explained. Why was it that Chimu was the first to discover the rules of the 9-layer dream? In fact, the so-called rules were all controlled by him. And why was it that in the end, Yi Zixian and Ming Ting Yao could safely leave the dream together? That was because after killing the other 6 people, when Chimu attacked Yi Zixian reversed time. He failed, and Yi Zixian relied on this opportunity to successfully pierce Chimu's heart. The heart's blood was the foundation of the nightmare. It was also at that time that Yi Zixian obtained the nightmare's ability, but he didn't tell Ming Ting Yao. Instead, he used his ability to control the dream and brought Ming Ting Yao along. It seemed like it was a narrow escape, but in fact, it was very easy to leave that world. This was what should have happened in this mission world. After understanding everything, Suwon used her willpower to wake herself up from the deep dream. After waking up, she was already in the hospital and started a new round of the dream game. This time, she disguised herself and pretended to be deceived by the nightmare. She let Chimu get closer to her little by little. Actually, from the moment Chimu killed Chun Yufeng, Suwon knew that Bai Xiaoyu wasn't number 1. Chun Yufeng was. So, Chun Yufeng was the first to die. And even though he disappeared after his death, he didn't leave this world. Instead, he turned into a ghost with his wounds. Yes, there were originally 3 ghosts in this world. The 3 of them had one thing in common, which was that they all had injuries on their bodies. Chimu's arm was injured. He said that he was in a car accident. Bai Xiaoyu also had injuries on her body. When Ming Ting Yao saw her, she looked like she was being chased by Fan Shujun. In fact, Fan Shujun was number 2. After Chun Yufeng died, Bai Xiaoyu began to chase after Fan Shujun, but she misjudged Fan Shujun's martial strength. In the end, it became Fan Shujun who chased her. If Ming Ting Yao didn't appear, Fan Shujun might have already eliminated Bai Xiaoyu. As for the 3rd ghost, it was Qin Lu. Suwon closed her eyes and searched in the world of dreams. She immediately saw Qin Lu and Fang Tian, who had been wandering on the road. Qin Lu hid himself very well. At least, Fang Tian didn't notice that Qin Lu had injuries on his body. Qin Lu and Fang Tian aren't far from here. Suwon opened her eyes and deeply looked at Fan Shujun. You're number 2. Fang Tian is number 3. If you die, do you think Qin Lu will kill Fang Tian? You want to kill me? Fan Shujun looked at Suwon and looked straight into her eyes. Suwon only smiled with a slightly profound meaning. Now, this world was under her control. She once again snapped her fingers at Fan Shujun, and Fan Shujun fainted. Look, the nightmare's ability is simply invincible and useful. But why did Chimu have to be so roundabout? Because he's the annoying plane restorer. His existence was to serve the male lead. At the same time, he also needed to eliminate her, the plane destroyer, but he couldn't directly kill her. Therefore, Chimu, no, he should be called Chiyu. Chiyu chose the most commonly used emotional attack. He planned to deceive her memory and then make her fall in love with him. This way, he could logically help the male lead level up and help the male and female lead promote their feelings. He could also deal with her, the plane destroyer, at the same time. This was really the best of both worlds. If she was still her original self, perhaps she would really be deceived by him. Unfortunately, since she met Suwon's heart ached for no reason again. After being ruthlessly deceived by that man, she no longer allowed herself to be deceived by anyone and be abandoned by anyone. Use the truest feelings to deceive you, and use the cruelest way to abandon you. Suwon learned this kind of conduct from Su. These years, she had slowly approached Su. She had gradually become as ruthless as him, as cold, and as unscrupulous. So, in this world, in this game, Chi was never Su Wan's opponent. On the spacious street, two figures, one tall and one short, were walking in tandem. Suddenly, the tall figure in front of them stopped. Qin Lu. Fang Tian looked at the person in front of her with some doubt. Qin Lu, what's wrong? Nothing. Hiding the strange look in his eyes, Qin Lu slowly clenched his fists. From the moment he woke up from the nightmare, he knew that he was dead. The wound on his back was the evidence that he had died from serious injuries. At that moment, his mind was blank. It wasn't until Fang Tian's phone call came in and he heard her sweet and weak voice that Qin Lu gradually recovered his consciousness. In his mind, there was a list of people to kill. Everyone was assigned a number and they must kill people in order. Number 1 Qin Yufeng, number 2 Fan Shujun, number 3 Fang Tian, number 4 Su Wan, number 5 Easy Xin, number 6 Meng Tingyao. At that time, Qin Lu was suddenly a little afraid. Not afraid that he wouldn't have the chance to resurrect, but afraid that Fang Tian would have an accident. So, he told Fang Tian his home address on the phone. He wanted to protect her. This feeling had never been so strong before. Just now, some information flashed in Qin Lu's mind. Number 2 Fan Shujun disappeared. Chapter 37. Why aren't you going? Fang Tian saw that Qin Lu was still in a daze. She stepped forward with some worry and stood beside Qin Lu. She hesitated, but still raised her hand and gently pulled his sleeve. I suddenly remembered that I left something at home. Qin Lu suddenly turned to look at Fang Tian. Tian, accompany me back to get it. Let's not go find Su Wan first. Now, any place was not safe for Fang Tian. The most reliable place Qin Lu could think of was his own home. Fang Tian did not doubt Qin Lu's words. Seeing Qin Lu turn around and walk back, Fang Tian obediently followed behind him. The two of them had just walked a short distance when they saw three familiar figures. Qin Lu. Bai Xiaoyu first discovered Qin Lu's figure and glanced at Fang Tian beside him. Bai Xiaoyu looked pensive and looked at Qin Lu with a strange gaze. With Qin Lu's strength, dealing with Fang Tian was as easy as flipping his hand. But now, Fang Tian was still alive and wearing Qin Lu's coat. This was really unexpected. Bai Xiaoyu did not act rashly. She didn't know what Qin Lu was planning and just silently looked at the two people. From the beginning, Bai Xiaoyu knew that she was a ghost. 3 ghosts, 6 people. Although there were few ghosts, they had many targets. Relatively speaking, this situation was very advantageous to them. But in reality, killing a person in exchange for the chance to continue living in that person's place. This sounded very simple, but after familiarizing herself with the rules, Bai Xiaoyu knew how cruel the rules of this world were. When you kill a person, while you get the chance to live, that person will also become a ghost. In other words, there will be fewer and fewer people. If everything goes well, each ghost will kill a person, and the 3 new ghosts will kill the remaining 3 people. Then, in the end, there will be exactly 6 people who can survive. Unfortunately, reality was not a mathematical calculation. At least now, Bai Xiaoyu did not kill a single person. It seemed that Qin Lu did not make a move, and now 2 people have died. According to the rules, there should be 5 ghosts now, and only 4 people left. If things continued to develop like this, the final result would only be mutual annihilation. Bai Xiaoyu, who had always been familiar with the law of the jungle, was also very nervous at this time. She was afraid that Qin Lu would expose her identity, then her current situation would become very dangerous and passive. Fortunately, Qin Lu only took a deep look at Bai Xiaoyu. Then his gaze fell on Easy Xian and Meng Tingyao. Right now, there were 5 people here. Except for Bai Xiaoyu, the others wouldn't hurt Fang Tian. Qin Lu hesitated for a moment and finally decided to get together with them. This seemed to be a good choice. Qin Lu. Su Wan, who saw everything, was also surprised. She didn't expect that Qin Lu really didn't make a move against Fang Tian. Moreover, it seemed that he had already made up his mind to protect Fang Tian. How enviable. Fan Shujun, who had fainted at the side, slowly woke up. He found that he was still alive, and Su Wan was sitting at the side with a smile. Leave this world or dominate this world. Which of the two choices do you want? Su Wan looked at Fan Shujun. Her voice was low and deep, with a bit of charm. You want both? At this time, Fan Shujun had already sat up straight and looked back at Su Wan with a sharp gaze. Humans are really greedy. Su Wan smiled. In the original plot, Izishuan wanted to have both, and as the male lead, he managed to achieve this in the end. Greed is one of the original sins of humans. Fan Shujun also smiled, but this time, his smile was particularly bashful. Actually, I was just joking. I just want to leave here. I'm not interested in anything here. I just want to be an ordinary person for the rest of my life. Ordinary person. Su Wan stared at Fan Shujun. In fact, from the beginning, she had sensed that Fan Shujun was not simple. He was more outstanding than many people, and this kind of person with sharp thinking, outstanding IQ, and high martial strength was only willing to be a gaming otaku. Perhaps this was what he pursued, the ordinary life of an ordinary person. People who were born with everything, they only wanted to live a quiet and ordinary life. As for those who were born in poverty, they desperately wanted to live a superior life. But in reality, who was better than who? Even if people were divided into 3, 6, and 9 classes at birth, everyone was still given equal opportunities to pursue happiness and dreams. Happiness in life, value in life, was never measured by money and status. Fan Shujun saw it clearly from the beginning, and Izishuan's heart was blinded by the sudden ability. Fan Shujun, I'll give you 2 tasks. As long as you complete them, I'll let you leave this world. Deal.
Da.
Izishuan shouted and sat up from the bed. The pain in his body seemed to have not disappeared. Opening his eyes, he looked at the strange yet familiar dormitory. Izishuan did not return to his senses for a long time. Zishuan. At this time, Chen Yufeng, who was sleeping on the upper bunk, suddenly bent down and looked at the sweating Izishuan. Did you have a nightmare? You're screaming so horribly. Chen Yufeng, looking at Chen Yufeng's tender and real face, Izishuan's heart was even more confused. Wasn't he killed by the Demon Master and a group of Demon Kings in the 13 layers of hell? Why did he return to the dormitory when he was in university? And he actually saw Chen Yufeng, who was personally killed by him that year. For a moment, Izishuan's head was in a mess. At this time, the dormitory's door was pushed open. Wearing a large set of pajamas and glasses, Fan Shujun walked in like a ghost. Seeing Izishuan and Chen Yufeng, Fan Shujun seemed to be a bit surprised. Zishuan, why are you so late? Didn't you say you were going to Tianqing Street to pick a birthday present for Su Wan today? Tianqing Street, birthday present, Su Wan. Izishuan's mind exploded, and his gaze gradually became deep and dangerous. Could it be that he was reborn? Moreover, he was reborn to the day he broke up with Su Wan. Izishuan remembered this day, and everything that happened on this day, very clearly. This was not because he missed his past girlfriend, but because on this day, he bought a jade pendant that changed his life on Tianqing Street. At this point, Izishuan did not have time to think about other things. He hurriedly put on his clothes and dashed out of the dormitory. Fuck, so anxious, in a hurry to reincarnate. Chen Yufeng looked at Izishuan's figure and couldn't help but mutter. Hearing his words, Fan Shujun only smiled mysteriously. Who knows? Maybe he really is in a hurry to reincarnate? The whole way, he was nervous and excited to Tianqing Street. From afar, Izishuan saw the small jewelry store where he bought the jade pendant. He rushed into the store like he was flying, but the result was that he was stunned at the door. Meng Tingyao, who was wearing a white dress, was like a fairy in a dream. She quietly stood in the store, and in her hand, she was holding the jade pendant that originally belonged to Izishuan. Tingyao, Izishuan was absent-minded for a moment. In his previous life, he and Meng Tingyao were a couple. At that time, they were trapped in the 9-layer nightmare world. Izishuan used his ability to kill the real nightmare and obtained his ability. Then he hid his real ability and took Meng Tingyao to escape from the dream with a narrow escape. Izishuan had to admit that at that time, he was selfish. He liked Meng Tingyao and wanted to obtain her heart. So he became the only hero in her heart and logically became the most important man in her life. After coming out of the dream world, Easy Xian thought that he and Meng Tingyao were saved, but the two people found that they could no longer return to their original world. It turned out that the place where they had the car accident was the junction between the human world and hell. The souls of the 8 people were pulled into the hell world, and the nightmare they experienced at the beginning was only the first layer of hell's test. The hell world had a total of 18 layers. Only by passing through the 18 layers test could they return to the human world. Easy Xian already didn't remember how many years he stayed in that world and how many people he killed. He only remembered that his ability was getting stronger and stronger. The brothers and women by his side were getting more and more. But even so, the person he loved the most was still Meng Tingyao. Recalling the last moments of his previous life, he was ambushed and Meng Tingyao also fell into the same dangerous situation as him. Didn't know if she was in danger in the end? Tingyao, Easy Xian deeply sighed in his heart. Everything in his previous life was already in the past. They still had this life to live together. When Easy Xian sorted out his mood and looked at Meng Tingyao again, he found that she had already paid for that mysterious jade pendant. Seeing that she was about to leave his side, Easy Xian became anxious and suddenly pulled Meng Tingyao's arm. Meng Tingyao was suddenly pulled by someone, and her face immediately became cold. Seeing that the person pulling her was Easy Xian, her face slightly relaxed, but there was still some displeasure between her eyebrows. It's you, ah. Is there a problem? This jade pendant. Easy Xian's gaze fell on the jade pendant on Meng Tingyao's chest. Although he tried his best to conceal it, Meng Tingyao still felt the hidden light in his eyes. You like this jade pendant? Meng Tingyao broke free from Easy Xian's hand and coldly asked. I actually, Suwan likes this jade pendant. I want to buy it for her as a birthday present. This jade pendant was originally a woman's style. Easy Xian conveniently found an excuse, which seemed to be reasonable. Oh, this is simple. Actually, I bought several pieces of this style. I originally intended to give it to my sisters in the dormitory. You don't need to specially buy it for her. You can choose another one, BA. Saying this, Meng Tingyao was about to leave, but how could Easy Xian be willing to let her go? Tingyao. He once again stopped her, but this time, Meng Tingyao's face was even colder. I don't seem to be very familiar with you, classmate E. Easy Xian's face also slightly changed. He just remembered that right now, he was only an ordinary classmate to Meng Tingyao. Meng Tingyao, I already promised Suwan to buy it for her. Moreover, she only likes the one you're wearing. Can you part with it and sell it to me? No matter how much money you want, it's fine. You have money? Meng Tingyao somewhat strangely looked at Easy Xian. A gentleman doesn't steal another's love. I don't know whether Suwan likes it or not, but I like it very much. I'll have to trouble you to pass. I'm in a hurry. Saying this, Meng Tingyao passed by Easy Xian and left in large strides. Looking at her departing figure, Easy Xian's eyes flashed, but in the end, he still didn't chase after her. The days passed very peacefully. On the day of Suwan's birthday, Easy Xian broke up with her. After that, Easy Xian kept looking for all kinds of opportunities to get close to Meng Tingyao. Unfortunately, Meng Tingyao's personality was too cold and not particularly easy to get along with. Until half a year later, Qin Yufeng proposed that everyone go to the forest park together for a spring outing. For this reason, he specially prepared a super luxurious 7-seater Audi car, which just happened to be able to seat 8 people. Easy Xian, who had been paying close attention to Meng Tingyao, knew that Meng Tingyao was still wearing that jade pendant. She didn't activate that jade pendant and also didn't discover the jade pendant's secret. Then, this spring outing became the trip that Easy Xian was most concerned about. He was familiar with that dream world in his memory. He could once again obtain Meng Tingyao's trust in that world, then get the jade pendant, activate his ability, and defeat the nightmare. This way, he could be like his past life and bring Meng Tingyao to the underworld to create a new world. This time, he must make those people who betrayed him in his past life pay 10 times, 100 times the price in blood. Easy Xian's plan was very perfect, but unfortunately, everything was wrong from the beginning. Qin Yufeng organized this spring outing in order to pursue Meng Tingyao. Although Meng Tingyao agreed to Qin Yufeng's request, She changed the location of the spring outing at the last minute. There was no car accident, no nightmare, and even no ability. Easy Shin was muddle-headed and felt that the whole world was wrong. There must be a mistake somewhere. His life was clearly not like this. When his emotions were about to collapse, Easy Shin finally stopped Ming Tingyao, who was about to go out for a walk at the entrance of her villa. Looking at the jade pendant that she still wore on her chest, Easy Shin's eyes flashed with a greedy and crazy red light. "Give me the jade pendant." Jade pendant, jade pendant. He wanted the jade pendant. He wanted the ability. He didn't want to be an ordinary person. He was born to be a person above others. Easy Shin's dark eyes gradually became ferocious. Looking at this familiar yet unfamiliar face, Meng Tingyao finally sighed and put her finger on the jade pendant that had become very smooth. "Easy Shin, I know that you like me. You pestering me like this is actually because you want to be together with me, right? In fact, you aren't that hard to accept. In fact, I can't consider being together with you." Saying this, Meng Tingyao lifted her face and fixed her eyes on Easy Shin. "Easy Shin, you and I can be together. The two of us can live a very happy life. What do you say?" "Happy?" Easy Shin's gaze was still fixed on Meng Tingyao's chest. He was used to being a person above others. He already regarded mortals as ants. He felt that he was already a godlike existence. How could such a person be willing to be immortal? "Tingyao, I love you. I am also willing to be together with you for a lifetime. Be good. Give me the jade pendant. I can take you to the peak of glory. No one in this world can surpass me." Easy Shin seemed to see his past life where he sat on countless money and beauties. That was the life he should have. Ha ha ha. Hearing Easy Shin's words, Meng Tingyao finally couldn't help but laugh. While laughing, she cried. It turned out that what Fan Shujun said was true. She prayed for a pair for a lifetime. She hoped to be together with Easy Shin again and grow old together for a lifetime. It was really just her own idiotic dream. "The jade pendant and me, you can only choose one." Meng Tingyao took off the jade pendant and put it in her palm. Her heart still held the last trace of hope. However, Easy Shin only hesitated for a moment and still chose that mysterious jade pendant. Easy Shin, that kind of person, looked decisive on the surface, but in reality, he was a selfish person. Suwon quietly watched as Easy Shin happily took back his ability and quietly watched as Meng Tingyao sadly turned around and left. It's said that in love, whoever is moved first loses. This kind of saying is sometimes not accurate. Some people are easily moved and also easily changed. Since ancient times, men were fickle in love. Suwon also believed that in this world, there were good men who were infatuated. For example, Qin Lu. But even more were people like Easy Shin. They were unwilling to be ordinary and bite off more than they could chew. They thought that they were infatuated for a long time, but in reality, they were the most fickle people. "Fan Shujun, you did a good job this time." Suwon turned her head and glanced at Fan Shujun, who had been silently standing behind her. Fan Shujun still smiled shyly. "What are you going to do next?" "I want to let Easy Shin continue to be betrayed in the next layer of the dream and continue to be reborn. Until the day he has nothing left." Suwon's voice was very calm, without a trace of coldness, but Fan Shujun felt cold all over. Women really are terrifying creatures. Fan Shujun didn't understand why Suwon wanted to torture Easy Shin like this, but he also didn't intend to ask further. He and Suwon were only business partners, or it could be said that they had a subordinate relationship. Whatever she ordered, he would do. Everyone would get what they want, and the ending would be happy. This was enough. When Suwon opened her eyes in the execution room again, her gaze was particularly sharp. In the world of the dream, she had Easy Shin betrayed and left by everyone. In the end, Meng Tingyao no longer had any expectations for him. Everyone left him, leaving him alone, bitterly struggling in yesterday's dream. This was Easy Shin's ending. After leaving the execution room, Suwon checked her points. Then, she frowned and immediately opened the mission panel in her communicator. Without looking at it, she casually selected a lower-level mission and directly returned to the execution room. This time, she unexpectedly met the people from that side, making Suwon's mood very bad. She urgently needed to enter a simple and comfortable mission world to properly calm her mood. Finally finished writing. Seeing that the little friends are very concerned about our family's Surue, he will reappear in the second volume of Substitute Lover. Chapter 38. Sitting in the first-class cabin of the plane, Suwon lowered her eyes and looked at the financial magazine that was placed flat on her knees. The cover of the magazine was the hottest upstart in the business world in the country, and also Haoyue Group's new CEO. Xiao Jingimo was Xiang City's Xiao family's eldest grandson. At a young age, he already relied on his accurate vision and swift and decisive methods to manage the huge Haoyue Group in an orderly manner, making it prosper with each passing day. He was Xiang City's top diamond bachelor and was also the dream lover of many Xiang City's young ladies. This kind of rich and powerful, young and promising man, moreover, he was also handsome. Which woman wouldn't like him? Of course, no one in this world would have a smooth life. In other people's eyes, Xiao Jingmo was a winner in life, but in Xiao Jingmo's eyes, he was just a loser in love. Before he was found by Xiao family, Xiao Jingmo was just an ordinary teenager. He and his mother depended on each other for survival. The two people's days weren't considered poor, but they weren't rich either. When Xiao Jingmo was in high school, he fell in love with a girl. The girl was his deskmate. Her grades were very good, and she was also very beautiful. The most important thing was that her personality was very good. She was especially kind and enthusiastic. At that time, Xiao Jingmo was also at the age where he first awakened to love. He and the girl had good impressions of each other. The two people quickly confirmed their relationship of love and made an agreement to enter the same university and major after graduating from high school. At that time, the future they were looking forward to was beautiful and happy, but after the college entrance examination, everything changed. The girl who was born into a wealthy family chose to go abroad to study. Before leaving, she didn't even inform him and only left Xiao Jingmo a cold and indifferent breakup letter. That year was the most painful and most dispirited year in Xiao Jingmo's life. Not long after the girl went abroad, Xiao Jingmo's mother also passed away because of an acute illness. He had no relatives or friends in the huge Xiang city. Many nights, Xiao Jingmo relied on reminiscing the sweetness and beauty of the past to pass. Until one day, when Xiao family's people found him, only then did Xiao Jingmo know that he was actually the son of Xiao family's eldest young master who was stranded outside. Speaking of Xiao Jingmo's life experience, it was also a melodramatic story of a rich and powerful Cinderella. At that time, young Master Xiao fell in love with a beautiful poor girl. Their relationship was strongly opposed by Old Man Xiao, who was the head of the Xiao family at that time. Later, young Master Xiao simply made an appointment with the girl to elope together. However, on the day of the appointment, young Master Xiao had a serious traffic accident on the way to the appointed place. He was directly sent abroad by Old Man Xiao for treatment. Although the medical equipment there was more perfect, young Master Xiao still passed away a month later. And that commoner girl couldn't wait for anyone that day, so she could only dejectedly step on the train to return to her hometown. After returning to her hometown, she only knew that she was pregnant. In the end, she gave birth to Xiao Jingmo. She laboriously raised her son alone. Until many years later, when she once again brought her son to Xiang City, she unexpectedly found out that young Master Xiao didn't abandon her, but had an accident and passed away. Since then, Xiao Jingmo's mother's body began to rapidly weaken, and finally, she also passed away. Xiao Jingmo only discovered his mother's will after her death, and at this time, Xiao family's people also came to find him. According to his mother's last wish, Xiao Jingmo returned to Xiao family. Facing this grandson who, no matter if it was his face or personality, was very similar to his own son, Old Man Xiao loved the house and its crow, and wished that he could deliver the entire Xiao family to Xiao Jingmo. At that time, although Xiao Jingmo had a grudge in his heart, he didn't vent his anger on his grandfather. On the contrary, he was very envious of his mother and father's feelings. Thinking of his first love who left him without saying goodbye, Xiao Jingmo's heart had always been aching dully. Some wounds seemed to have disappeared and calmed down, but in fact, it had already hurt to the bone marrow. In Xiang City, There were countless women scrambling to curry favor in front of Xiao Jingmo, but his heart had never been moved. Until one day, he saw a young girl working in a bar. Her body had the shadow of her. That girl named Luo Chu Chu was still a university student. Because her family was poor, she had to work several jobs every day. Although her life was very hard, she had always been very optimistic. At that time, Luo Chu Chu never thought that one day she would meet a noble young master like Xiao Jingmo. When she came back to her senses, Xiao Jingmo had already walked into her heart step by step. Luo Chu Chu fell in love with Xiao Jingmo. Her love was very pure, but at that time, she didn't know that the reason why Xiao Jingmo took special care of her was because her face looked very similar to Xiao Jingmo's first love, Suwan. That's right, Suwan was the girl that Xiao Jingmo deeply loved in the past. Her fingers lightly stroked the cover of the magazine a few times. The corner of Suwan's lips slowly rose into a mocking smile. What was a real cannon fodder? The original Suwan, in Xiao Jingmo and Luo Chu Chu's feelings, was 100% cannon fodder. 8 years ago, when Suwan took the college entrance examination, she and her lover agreed to enter the same university. But before her college entrance examination, her father had a heart attack and was hospitalized. In the hospital, her mother told her that her father was cheated by someone. Not only was the company facing bankruptcy, but he also owed a huge debt outside. It was because her father couldn't stand this stimulation that he got sick. And now, her father, who was still in the intensive care unit, was facing the choice of life and death, but the family couldn't even take out the most basic surgery fees. At that time, Suwan was foolish and completely didn't know what to do. At this time, her mother told her that someone was willing to pay to send her father abroad for surgery, and that person was also willing to help their family repay the debt. But that person had a condition, which was for Suwan and Xiao Jingmo to break up, and then the whole family go abroad together. For at least 5 years, they were not allowed to step half a step into Huaxia. At that time, Suwan was only a young girl who was inexperienced in the world. She couldn't understand the twists and turns inside. She only knew that she must save her father. So, she left behind a breakup letter and quietly went abroad with her parents. This time, she went away for 8 years. 8 years later, Suwan, who had already become the general manager of a certain brand in Huaxia, once again returned to Xiang City. In Xiang City, she once again met Xiao Jingmo, who had already become the chairman of Haoyue Group. In fact, in these 8 years, Suwan had never forgotten Xiao Jingmo. She felt that she had let him down. On one hand, she wanted him to forget her and start a new life. On the other hand, she also hoped that he would still remember her and still love her. This kind of contradictory mood made Suwan not know what kind of attitude she should use to face Xiao Jingmo. The reunion after 8 years caused great waves in the hearts of the two of them. Right now, Xiao Jingmo had already been in love with Luo Chu Chu for more than a year. He had always regarded Luo Chu Chu as Suwan's substitute. When the real Suwan returned to the country, Xiao Jingmo was somewhat uncertain. Was it Suwan, this person, or that unfruitful first love that he couldn't forget? And at the same time, Suwan also knew of Luo Chu Chu's existence, and she also met someone she didn't expect, Fangzi asked. She was Xiang City's Fang family's second young miss and claimed to be Xiao Jingmo's fiancée. Fangzi asked and told Suwan that the bankruptcy of Su family's company was actually single-handedly planned by Xiao Leo Yizi. He would never allow his grandson to marry a woman like Suwan or Luo Chu Chu to become Xiao family's granddaughter-in-law. Suwan, who knew the truth, drank in the bar for an entire night and finally couldn't help but call Xiao Jingmo. She told him everything that happened these past few years. The hidden story of that year made Xiao Jingmo endlessly shocked. He felt that he owed Suwan too much, so Xiao Jingmo decided to break up with Luo Chu Chu and be together with Suwan. After the two people got together again, they encountered Xiao Leo Yizi's opposition. As a result, Xiao Jingmo moved out of Xiao family and lived with Suwan in an apartment not far from the company. The two people seemed to have returned to the period of being passionately in love. Every day was very happy, but Suwan keenly felt that there were many times when Xiao Jingmo would stare at her absent-mindedly, as if he was looking at another person through her. At that time, Suwan forced herself not to think too much. Until one day, Suwan sprained her ankle. Xiao Jingmo originally supported her to change the medicine, but as a result, he met Luo Chu, who had just gotten into a car accident. At that time, Xiao Jingmo seemed to have gone crazy and threw Suwan away. His entire heart and eyes only had Luo Chu in his eyes. At that moment, Suwan knew that her first love had already ended 8 years ago. They could no longer go back in the end. Who was whose substitute? Suwan dejectedly withdrew from Xiao Jingmo's emotional world. She planned to resign from her position in the country and return abroad to take care of her parents. On the day of her departure, Xiao Jingmo drove his car to send her off. Halfway through, Xiao Jingmo's car brakes suddenly malfunctioned. At the juncture of life and death, Suwan used her thin and weak body to protect Xiao Jingmo and also ended her short life as a cannon fodder. After Suwan's death, Xiao Jingmo found out that the person who tampered with his car was actually Fang family's eldest young master, Fang Zimu. And the reason why Fang Zimu wanted to kill Xiao Jingmo was because he had always been infatuated with Luo Chu. Alright, the ending of the story was that Fang family was played to bankruptcy by Xiao Jingmo. Fang clan's brother and sister had nothing, while Xiao Jingmo and Luo Chu finally got married. Moreover, the two people immediately went to Suwan's grave to show their affection after getting married. Xiaowan Jiejia, we are very happy. You rest in peace. Suwan, rest in peace, your brother-in-law. If you really love a person so much that you can die for him, then can you bear that after you die, he immediately married someone else to show their affection? Suwan didn't know what other people thought, but in short, if it was her, she absolutely couldn't bear it. The person she loved must always love her. Even if she died, he must only love her for a lifetime. Chapter 39. In Xiang City in July, it was raining continuously. When Luo Chu came out of the mall with the cake, it had been raining for a long time. Many deep and shallow puddles had gathered on the ground. Oh no! She rubbed her face in annoyance and nervously looked at the cake box in her hand. Today was Xiao Jingmo's birthday. She personally made this cake in the DIY shop on the 4th floor of the mall. Seeing that it was almost time for Xiao Jingmo to get off work, Luo Chu stood at the entrance of the mall hesitantly. She blamed herself for being too muddle-headed. She clearly knew that it would rain these few days, but she still forgot to bring an umbrella when she went out. She was thinking of going back to the mall to buy an umbrella, but as soon as she turned around, Luo Chu froze in place. A young and beautiful woman walked towards her. She was wearing a red dress and a short white coat. Her simple and bright attire matched with her chestnut curly hair, making her look particularly sexy and charming. Of course, this wasn't the reason why Luo Chu was in a daze. What she really cared about was this woman's appearance. She had a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes. Her gaze was languid. Luo Chu was very familiar with this pair of eyes because she herself also had such a pair of eyes. But compared to the woman in front of her, Luo Chu felt that she was not good enough. Perhaps it was because Luo Chu's gaze was too focused and enthusiastic. The oncoming woman slowly stopped in front of Luo Chu. Hello. She softly opened her mouth and her voice was surprisingly pleasant to hear. Hello. Luo Chu was somewhat at a loss. Her face flashed with embarrassment. Actually I am. For a moment, she was suddenly at a loss for words and didn't know what to explain. I'm also very surprised. The woman seemed to see through Luo Chu's embarrassment. She faintly smiled at Luo Chu and took the initiative to speak again. Just now, when I first saw you, I almost thought that I traveled through time and saw my past self. They were very similar. Apart from that pair of eyes, the other facial features were also very similar. Since we met, it's a kind of fate. My name is Suwan. Suwan smiled and extended her hand towards Luo Chu. Hearing Suwan's name, Luo Chu's body stiffened for a moment. After a while, she apologetically shook hands with Suwan. Hello, my name is Luo Chu. Suwan knew that today was Xiao Jingmo's birthday, so she specially waited here for Luo Chu to appear. But Luo Chu thought this was just an accidental encounter. Suwan that this name was actually not unfamiliar to her. Not long ago, a young Miss Fang once looked for Luo Chu and told her that Xiao Jingmo didn't really love her. Xiao Jingimo only treated her as a substitute for another person. And that person was called Su Wan, Xiao Jingmo's first love. At that time, Luo Chuchu was suspicious and uneasy, but after getting along with Xiao Jingimo for more than a year, she was more willing to believe that there were true feelings between them. They must love each other. A person's eyes can't lie. Before today, Luo Chuchu always firmly believed in this point. But now, the smile on Luo Chuchu's mouth was somewhat forced. Xiao Jingimo liked her eyes very much. Every time he looked at her, he was especially focused and affectionate. However, were they really looking at her? Luo Chuchu suddenly felt somewhat uncertain. Just when Luo Chuchu was secretly suspicious, Su Wan seemed to have suddenly seen the cake in her hand and said with a pleasantly surprised face, "Is it your birthday today? I have a friend's birthday today. What a coincidence." "Yes, is it?" Luo Chuchu's hand that was holding the cake box unconsciously tightened. She clearly told herself in her heart to quickly leave and not think too much, but her body couldn't move at all. "Is it your boyfriend?" When the words came out, Luo Chuchu was first startled, but in the next second, she still asked again. "It's the person who's having his birthday today?" She couldn't deceive herself. Actually, she cared. She cared very much. And it can be considered so? Su Wan's expression was somewhat hesitant. "We haven't seen each other for many years. Maybe he already no longer loves me." "Oh, so it's like that." Luo Chuchu knew that her current expression must be extremely ugly. I still have things to do. I'll leave first." Not waiting for Su Wan to answer, Luo Chuchu already turned around and quickly ran out of the mall, even forgetting to buy an umbrella. A woman in love, ah. Su Wan shook her head. She walked to the door and saw Luo Chuchu cutting a sorry figure rushing into the heavy rain. However, she hadn't run a few steps when she was blocked by a black Maserati. Su Wan stood far away and couldn't see the appearance of the person in the car through the curtain of rain. But she was certain that the person driving was definitely not Xiao Jingimo. "Get in the car." The Maserati's window slowly rolled down, revealing a young man's face. The man looked to be 27 or 28 years old. His soft, short hair was dyed chestnut and stuck to his bright and clean forehead. The man's complexion was not white, but it was very healthy and sexy. His handsome facial features carried a bit of gloominess, especially that pair of pitch-black eyes. Occasionally, a cold glint flashed past, making people involuntarily feel frightened and alarmed. Fortunately, although his face was cold, his gaze was still peaceful. "Ah, Fang Zimu." Luo Chuchu saw the man's face and was first stunned. Then she hesitated for a moment, but she still quickly opened the car door and got into the car. Fang Zimu glanced at Luo Chuchu from the rearview mirror and was about to drive away. Suddenly, his line of sight stopped somewhere. That heart that was already numb to the point of not feeling suddenly fiercely beat. "It's her." A cold glint flashed in his eyes. Fang Zimu suddenly opened the car door and rushed towards the entrance of the mall. But when he ran there, the figure that made his heart beat had already disappeared. The vast curtain of rain blurred Fang Zimu's line of sight. The ice-cold rain followed his soft, short hair and dripped on his face. "Is that you?" Fang Zimu unconsciously tightened his fists, leaving a red scar on his palms. After standing in the rain for a moment, he silently turned around and left. In the cyan, misty rain, that tall and slender figure looked very lonely. Until that black Maserati sped away in the curtain of rain, Su Wan slowly appeared from a corner with an umbrella. When he sensed her, she actually saw him too. Su Wan already guessed that the owner of that car should be young Master Fang Zimu, but after seeing that man get out of the car, Su Wan almost reflexively turned around and quickly hid in the corner. She didn't know what was wrong with her, but that face that was exactly the same as Su Rui's, for a moment, really scared Su Wan. Maybe it was just that they looked alike? Well, Su Wan must admit that Fang Zimu not only looked like a mature version of Su Rui, his gaze, the faint aura that his body emitted, and the feeling he gave her were all exactly the same as Su Rui. Moreover, if Su Wan didn't feel wrong, the other party clearly recognized her just now. It couldn't be helped. Su Rui's perception was simply terrifying. Why was he here? And he even became Fang Zimu. Chapter 40. When Fang Zimu returned to Fang family, Fang Ziwen had just finished her makeup. "Gu, you're back." Fang Ziwen looked at the mirror and checked her makeup. She quickly raised her head and looked at Fang Zimu. Hearing Fang Ziwen's words, Fang Zimu didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the sofa in the villa's hall and lightly leaned on the sofa. "Gu." Fang Ziwen, who was finally satisfied with her dress today, put away the makeup mirror and looked at Fang Zimu not far away. She couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise. "How come you're all wet?" At this time, Fang Zimu was particularly quiet and leaning on the left side of the sofa. The custom-made suit that was worth hundreds of thousands of yuan was wet. He closed his eyes and let the water drip from the ends of his hair onto his face. At this time, Fang Zimu was too quiet. So quiet that Fang Ziwan was at a loss. In her memory, her brother had always been strong and overbearing, even cold and unreasonable. She didn't expect that such a strong brother would actually have such a quiet side. "Go, how come you?" Fang Ziwen couldn't help but feel a bit soft-hearted. She wanted to step forward and ask, but her voice was suddenly cut off by Fang Zimu's indifferent voice. "Shut up." Fang Zimu suddenly opened his eyes. That pair of slender pitch-black eyes flashed with a trace of blood. Fang Ziwen fearfully retreated 2 steps. Her face became deathly pale in an instant. "Gu, gee, I was wrong." Her voice carried an uncontrollable tremble. Fang Ziwen, who was familiar with her brother's temperament and nature, was very clear. At this time, Fang Zimu was on the verge of a violent rage. He was very scary at this time. Glancing at Fang Ziwen's shivering appearance that was wrapped up like a peacock, Fang Zimu's heart became even more irritable. How could this kind of trash get Xiao Jingmo's favor? If it wasn't because his current body was Fang Ziwen's brother, Su Rui really wanted to slap this incompetent woman to death. As soon as he thought of his mission goal when he entered this world, he thought of his current bitter identity as an affectionate supporting male. Su Rui's face became even more unsightly. He gloomily stared at Fang Ziwen a few times before he once again spoke in a low voice. "You want to go to Xiao Jingmo's birthday party?" "Yes." Hearing her elder brother mention Xiao Jingmo, Fang Ziwen's face couldn't help but smile. "Jingmo personally invited me. I naturally have to dress up well. After all, I'm his fiancé. Maybe he will invite me for the first dance tonight." Speaking till here, Fang Ziwen couldn't help but straighten her body, as if she was particularly proud. In fact, Fang Ziwen's appearance wasn't bad, but this young lady had grown up crooked since childhood. She always mingled with a group of Gothic-style rich second generation, causing her own aesthetic to be a bit distorted. Su Rui somewhat disdainfully looked at Fang Ziwen's multicolored hair. She thought that she was a different kind of firework, but in fact, she was a unique feather duster. He raised his wrist and looked at the time. Su Rui simply stood up and pulled Fang Ziwen towards the door. Brother, what are you doing?" Fang Zi asked with a bit of apprehension. She thought that her brother's anger hadn't subsided yet. Was he planning to vent his anger on her? Thinking of the tragic end of those people who had offended her brother, Fang Ziwen's legs trembled and her voice trembled. "Brother, you're my younger sister." "No, you're my blood brother, ah." It was still raining outside. Su Rui stood at the entrance of the villa. He pushed Fang Ziwen into the heavy rain and looked at her indifferently as she was drenched by the rain. Looking at the makeup on her face being smeared by the rain, Su Rui's expression eased up a lot. "Go find Yafei and let him help you cut your hair short and dye it back to black. Come back before 4:30 for me to check." Before his voice fell, Su Rui had already turned around indifferently. Bang! The door of the villa in front of Fang Ziwen ruthlessly closed. Fang Ziwen fiercely bit her lips, but her heart felt very powerless. It's really enough to have such a ferocious older brother. "Older sister Wan, this is Xiao family's invitation card." The assistant, Chun Wei, placed an exquisitely crafted invitation card in front of Su Wan. Su Wan had just returned from the shopping mall. She casually took off her small jacket and only wore the one-shoulder red dress, revealing her fair and smooth shoulders. Her whole person looked particularly casual and lazy. "Xiao family?" Sitting on her boss's chair, Su Wan played with the invitation card and the corner of her mouth raised into a playful smile. "Our EVFA has always had a cooperative relationship with Haoyue Group. However, this is the first time Xiao family has sent us an invitation to a private banquet, right? Yes, Chenwei, who was at the side, also had a face of deep thought. Maybe it's because this year is Chief Xiao's 25th birthday, so there are more people invited? Chenwei really didn't know what Xiao family was thinking, but he felt that this was a great thing to pull the relationship between both parties closer. Moreover, with his boss's methods, settling Xiao family was simply a matter of minutes. Since they have invited us with sincerity, we can only reluctantly accept. As she spoke, Su Wan stood up and her slender fingers pressed the invitation card under her palm. She leaned her upper body and her chestnut-colored curly hair slid down from her fair shoulders. A pair of good-looking peach blossom eyes stared at Chenwei on the other side of the desk with a smile. Go prepare a presentable suit. Tonight, be my male companion. Chenwei secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Boss, are you openly seducing me? I'm a person with a family. What should I do? I really need 120% of self-control by older sister Wan's side of this painful and happy bitter assistant's life. Seeing Chenwei flee in defeat, the smile on Su Wan's face gradually disappeared. It was said that the business world was like a battlefield. Xiang City's business world was even more treacherous. There were many wealthy families with financial power in Xiang City. The ones with the deepest foundation were Xiao family and Feng family. And in these few years, Xiao Jingmo's strong rise made Feng family's position feel threatened. The two families should have been opponents with blades and swords, but Xiao Leo Yizi had the intention to be on good terms with Feng family. Moreover, he fancied Feng Ziwan to be his granddaughter-in-law. Powerful marriage alliance? No, it was asking a tiger for its skin. Su Wan's gaze fell on that invitation card again. Whether it was Su family's bankruptcy 8 years ago, or this invitation card 8 years later, it was definitely Xiao Leo Yizi's handiwork. This Leo Yizi was really a chess expert. However, the feeling of meeting one's match was also not bad. Su Wan's whole body relaxed and sank into the comfortable leather chair. According to the original world's plot, she coincidentally met Xiao Jingmo on the 3rd day after returning to the country. But this time, Su Wan took the initiative to avoid a reunion with Xiao Jingmo. She originally planned to start with Luo Chu, but now it seems that meeting with Xiao Jingmo in advance was already impossible to change. Thinking of Luo Chu's birthday cake, Su Wan could imagine that she must be celebrating her birthday with Xiao Jingmo right now. And at the banquet tonight, Xiao Jingmo would also formally introduce Luo Chu to everyone in the business world for the first time. When a fake meets the real thing, and under the watchful eyes of everyone, what kind of scene would it be? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.